Welcome to part 15 of the Ultimate Unsolved Mysteries Iceberg. In this series, we deep dive cases including true crime, mysterious disappearances, myths and legends, strange events, cryptids, internet mysteries, and more. The slaying of Missy Bevers. In the early hours of April 18, 2016, a deeply unsettling incident unfolded at the Creekside Church of Christ in Midlothian, Texas. Missy Bevers, a 45-year-old fitness instructor, was preparing to conduct an early morning fitness class when she was slain by an unknown assailant. The pivotal piece of evidence in this investigation is surveillance footage showing an unidentified individual. This individual is clad in what appeared to be police SWAT gear while wandering the church's hallways. This footage has fueled widespread speculation regarding the identity and motives of the person involved. Missy's close family members were almost immediately ruled out. The investigation scrutinized Bevers' close circle, including her husband Brandon and father-in-law Randy, both of whom were quickly cleared based on confirmed alibis. Brandon was away on a fishing trip in Mississippi, and Randy was in California. At present, little evidence has been released by investigators in relation to this active and ongoing investigation. Further, no persons of interest or suspects have been named in the case. Anyone with information regarding this case is strongly encouraged to contact the Midlothian Police Department Criminal Investigation Division. The disappearance of Randy Leach. This case was suggested by subscriber Wes Coker. The disappearance of Randy Wayne Leach remains baffling and has unfortunately been overshadowed by many bizarre rumors and allegations. On April 15, 1988, Randy, a 17-year-old senior from Linwood, Kansas, vanished without a trace after attending a friend's pre-graduation party. Despite extensive investigations, his whereabouts, along with the car he was driving, a 1985 Dodge sedan, remain unknown. Randy's night began at 6:30 p.m. when he left his home to attend the party, making a few stops along the way. It wasn't until between 9:30 and 10 p.m. that he arrived at the party, a gathering that hosted up to 150 guests and involved significant drug and alcohol use. Though Randy was seen acting inebriated, it's uncertain if he consumed any alcohol himself. I note that there have been suggestions that Randy was drugged at the party, though this appears to be pure speculation. His last known sighting was around 2:15 a.m., and he never made it home, leading to his parents reporting him missing the following day. Investigations into Randy's disappearance were complicated by several factors. Unfortunately, a complete cleanup of the party site happened before law enforcement could examine it. Further, as seems to be a given with disappearances in the 1980s, rumors began to swirl that Randy had been the target of a satanic cult. Soon after the disappearance, a man came forth claiming to have been held captive by such a cult and seeing a corpse that could have been Randy's. This claim, however, was later dismissed by police who determined that the man was suffering from a hallucination induced by drug use. In the early 1990s, 3 men were arrested in connection with Randy's disappearance, but were released without charges, as no substantial evidence linked them to the case. The leading theories are as follows. Randy was the victim of foul play. This theory is simple. He ran afoul of someone at the party and didn't leave of his own accord. Ultimately, however, there is no evidence whatsoever for this. That said, this may be because the house party site wasn't investigated by the police until well after the cleanup occurred. Another leading theory is that Randy drove home under the influence and accidentally ended up driving his vehicle off the road and into a body of water. I note that there are other such cases of this happening, with the missing person not being found for decades after. The Randy Leach investigation, while of course cold, is still active. If you have any information regarding his disappearance, please contact the Kansas Bureau of Investigation or the Leavenworth County Sheriff's Office. Die Glocke. Die Glocke, or the bell in English, is one of the most controversial topics surrounding Nazi Germany's secret projects. Die Glocke was purportedly a top-secret scientific technological device developed by the Nazis, characterized by its bell-like shape and alleged anti-gravitational effects. The legend of Die Glocke was first brought to mainstream attention by Polish journalist Igor Witkowski around the year 2000. The description of Die Glocke involves a device made from a hard, heavy metal, standing about 13 feet tall, with a bell-like shape. It allegedly utilized a pair of counter-rotating cylinders filled with a violet-colored substance known as Zerum 525, alongside another substance called Leichtmetall. The device was rumored to be capable of producing an anti-gravitational effect. The operational base for Die Glocke was said to be a facility called the Giant, located near the Czech border. Despite these detailed descriptions, the lack of physical evidence and reliable documentation has led many to question the veracity of these claims. Critics and skeptics, however, have pointed out the lack of concrete evidence supporting the existence of Die Glocke. These critiques suggest that the narrative of Die Glocke, while fascinating, is more likely a concoction of post-war conspiracy theories and sensationalism rather than a historical fact. The narrative of Die Glocke did not exist in isolation. It was part of a larger pattern of post-war fascination with secret Nazi projects and alleged wonder weapons. The secrecy surrounding actual advanced Nazi technology lends significant credence to the theory. Further, there were famously legitimate, earth-shattering breakthroughs that came out of such programs. These inventions include the V-2 rocket, the first jet plane, the first night vision equipment, and the first assault rifle. Further German propaganda during the war was keen to play up these significant innovations, and the Allies, upon defeating the Germans, had little incentive to downplay German capability. Whatever you may say about the actual capabilities of this purported craft, pursuing such a project would not be outside of the Nazi wheelhouse. The Nazis' pursuit of advanced and esoteric technologies, such as the purported Die Glocke, can potentially be attributed to two known quantities associated with them: their relentless quest for military superiority and their interest in applying the occult to science and engineering. The Third Reich was known for its fascination with the arcane and the potential of groundbreaking technologies to turn the tide of World War II in their favor. Projects like Die Glocke would align with the Nazi regime's ambitions to develop Wunderwaffen, or wonder weapons, that could potentially offer them a decisive advantage. This drive was fueled by a combination of desperation, the ideological belief in German supremacy, and the desire to achieve technological feats that would dominate their adversaries. That said, ultimately the existence of such a project lacks evidence. I note that proponents of the theory point to Project Paperclip and other programs designed to transfer German technology and know-how in favor of Die Glocke. It's important to remember that Project Paperclip, while widely known now, was a secret program at the time. Further, some theories suggest that the Nazi leadership used this machine to escape Germany for the comfy caves of the Hollow Earth through an opening in Antarctica. I feel like a deep dive on that issue may be more suited for a conspiracy theory Iceberg series, though. On that note, let me know in the comments if there's any interest in an extensive conspiracy theory Iceberg series. And stay tuned, because I will be discussing Hollow Earth theory later in this video. Woo Bum Con. In April 1982, South Korea was rocked by one of the most devastating incidents in its history, perpetrated by Woo Bum Con. Woo, a police officer, acting out of profound evil, slew 62 individuals before ending himself in what was then the largest mass slaying event in history. This tragic event, known for its sheer scale and impact, has been the subject of extensive analysis and discussion, aiming to understand the underlying causes and motivations. Wu Bumkan's actions began following a domestic altercation with his girlfriend. After the altercation, he armed himself with an extensive arsenal from the police armory, including M2 carbines, handguns, ammunition, and hand grenades. Oh, and one more thing, Wu was no ordinary rural cop. He had served in an elite unit of the South Korean military and was highly proficient in small arms. Utilizing his knowledge of local areas and leveraging the trust placed in him as a police officer, Wu embarked on a killing spree that lasted several hours. Unsurprisingly, Wu's psychological state before the incident, as indicated by relatives and close friends, was fragile. They painted a picture of an unstable and isolated man grappling with severe depression, anxiety, and an inferiority complex. Despite these warning signs, the precise motive behind his actions remains largely speculative, with some attributing it to a sudden outburst of blind rage stemming from personal grievances. Also, to humanize the scale of the loss, I've included a poignant photograph of a child grieving the loss of his family. The dead internet theory. The dead internet theory suggests a digital world predominantly inhabited by artificial intelligence. Under this theory, genuine human interactions and content are overshadowed by bots and algorithmically generated material. This theory posits that a significant portion of online activity and content is not the product of human creativity, but of sophisticated software programs designed to mimic it. The roots of this theory trace back to claims that the internet effectively died around 2016 or 2017, entering a phase where AI-driven content began to dominate. According to some interpretations, this shift was orchestrated by powerful entities, including governments, to manipulate global populations through endless content. This narrative aligns with broader anxieties about authenticity and the erosion of human agency in the digital age, where the lines between reality and simulation blur. Social media platforms have become battlegrounds in this narrative. Instances on Twitter, now X, where bot activity and the propagation of identical messages led to suspicions of widespread non-human interaction, exemplify concerns about the authenticity of online engagement. Further, a significant amount of Reddit's content appears to be disguised advertisements for major brands. Some speculate the widespread, quote, upvoting of these clear advertisements is evidence of bot activity. Anyway, in my view, the internet is more alive than ever at this point, with larger and larger portions of the populace being perpetually online in some form. The location of the Holy Grail. The Holy Grail, also known as the Holy Chalice, has been the subject of countless legends, tales, and theories regarding its current location. The Holy Grail is a legendary artifact, often depicted as Jesus Christ's cup at the Last Supper. Interestingly, many of the legends associated with the Holy Grail derived from the matter of Britain, more commonly known as Arthurian legend. It's associated with Christian mythology, symbolizing divine grace, and is a central subject of numerous medieval and modern tales, representing the quest for ultimate truth and enlightenment. These theories range from it being hidden in plain sight in cathedrals in Spain, to being safeguarded by secret societies, or even lying in undiscovered locations around the world. One prominent theory posits that the Holy Grail resides in the Basilica of San Isidoro in Leon, Spain, believed to have been brought there from Cairo, Egypt, around 1100 AD. This theory suggests that the Grail was a gift to King Ferdinand of Spain, eventually finding its way into the basilica where it remains accessible for public viewing. Another fascinating location tied to the Grail is Glastonbury, England, where it is rumored to have been brought by Joseph of Arimathea. Here, the chalice well, reputed to grant eternal youth to its drinkers, is believed to be linked to the Grail's presence. Vatican City emerges as another potential resting place, with theories suggesting the Grail could be part of its vast and secretive collection of artifacts. This theory aligns with the Vatican's long history and extensive collection, making it a plausible guardian of the Grail. Valencia, also in Spain, offers another credible claim, where a chalice, recognized and used by popes during Mass, is believed by some to be the actual Holy Grail. The Knights Templar, a medieval Christian military order, are often associated with the Grail, with theories suggesting they might have safeguarded it. Other theories suggest that the Teutonic Knights, the famous order of German knights, brought the Grail from the Holy Land to the Baltic during the Northern Crusades. Under this theory, the Holy Grail may still be housed in the giant castle complex of the Teutonic Knights at Malbork, in present-day Poland. The true location of the Holy Grail will likely never be known. It seems quite unlikely that the object, which has had an unclear chain of custody since the Last Supper itself, will ever be definitively located. Jimmy here, the YouTuber behind the Lazy Chill Zone channel, asking you for a quick favor. If you're enjoying my content, please hit the like and subscribe buttons and tap that sweet notification bell so you can stay up to date on all my content. I've said it before, but my goal is to create the most expansive Iceberg series in YouTube history, and I want you all along for the ride. Also, consider signing up for a YouTube membership, joining the Patreon, and joining the Discord. Importantly, Patreon and YouTube membership purchases allow me to spend much more time making content for you to enjoy. Also, check out the merch store and pick something cool up while also supporting the channel. The Frankfurt Slasher. The Frankfurt Slasher's case, running from 1985 to 1990 in the Frankfurt neighborhood of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, remains a largely unsolved serial slaying. This period saw the tragic end of 8 to 9 individuals, all of whom suffered a violent demise. Leonard Christopher, who was convicted for one of these crimes, has been a central figure in discussions, though he has been dubbed a copycat killer by police. The victims shared certain characteristics. They were women living on the societal margins, many with backgrounds of mental health issues or substance dependency. Basically, the exact sort of vulnerable women monsters like these tend to prey upon. The investigation revealed a pattern of assault and a methodical manner in which the victims were left, pointing to a deliberate and cruel intention behind the acts. Most of the victims frequented Goldie's Bar, a local establishment, which emerged as a critical link in understanding the perpetrator's hunting ground. This bar was a noted hangout for women who engaged in the practice of paid companionship, so the full nature of the connection to the bar is unknown. Police efforts to solve the case were marred by controversy and criticism, with some accusing the police of attempting to sweep the slayings under the rug. Early on, there was hesitation in linking the crimes, and when connections were finally acknowledged, the focus on Leonard Christopher drew scrutiny. The reason for this scrutiny was simple. Christopher was black, and all evidence pointed toward the slayer being a white, middle-aged male. Despite the conviction of Christopher for one slaying, it is now widely believed that the real perpetrator remained at large. Given the socioeconomic status of the victims and the lack of attention on this case, unfortunately, I have my doubts as to whether this will ever be solved. Unfortunately, this is the reason serial slayers seem to target women at the bottom of this industry. Further, not all the women slain were engaged in this activity. However, they were all very much living on the outskirts of society. These predators know that many women engaging in paid companionship on the street level will have no one to advocate for them when they're gone. Further, they know that the police will, with a great degree of certainty, not allocate appropriate resources to the case. As an aside, it's unclear to me if there are any ongoing investigations into these slayings at present. The Haunting at Boy Scout Lane. Nestled away in Stevens Point, Wisconsin, Boy Scout Lane is a road shrouded in the darkest of urban legends and chilling tales. This isolated, though seemingly unremarkable stretch of land has captured the imagination of many, becoming a cornerstone of paranormal lore in the region. At the heart of Boy Scout Lane's lore is a tragic event purported to have occurred many years ago, involving a troop of Boy Scouts. The narrative, though varied in detail, consistently speaks to a disastrous outing that led to the untimely demise of the Scouts under different harrowing circumstances. One version tells of a catastrophic fire, ignited accidentally, engulfing the Scouts in flames during a camping trip. Another recounts a chilling scenario where the group's bus meets a tragic end, leading to their collective demise. Further, a more sinister variant suggests the Scouts fell victim to their trusted Scoutmaster, who slew them. What follows these tragic events is a series of paranormal phenomena attributed to the spirits of the deceased Scouts. Visitors and locals alike report an array of supernatural experiences. Some report spectral lantern lights seen bobbing through the darkness. Others report eerie sounds of footsteps and breaking branches from unseen entities. But perhaps the most chilling sight is the sight of a ghostly bus, reminiscent of the one the Scouts were last seen alive on during their trip. These latter accounts often include ghostly apparitions of the boys themselves, wandering the woods in eternal unrest. Despite its gripping narrative, there is no historical evidence supporting the initial tragic story associated with Boy Scout Lane. My brief investigations into public records and historical accounts have failed to unearth any incidents involving a Boy Scout troop meeting a tragic fate in the area. Further, I suspect if this story actually happened, there would be numerous articles and memorials to these children. This suggests the tales are purely the product of local folklore. As usual with haunting cases, the most likely explanation is that sightings are the result of mass hysteria type events, or simply the power of suggestion. At any rate, I've looked up Boy Scout Lane, and it does seem to have an eerie quality to it. It also appears to be extremely isolated, which can of course amplify the horror element. The disappearance of Jim Sullivan. This recommendation comes from subscriber Sus Ltd. Jim Sullivan, a musician who never quite found success during his life, vanished into the ether in 1975. His disappearance remains a perplexing, unsolved mystery, leaving a void filled with speculation, theories, and an enduring legacy of his music. Born on August 13, 1940, in San Diego, California, Sullivan's journey from a high school quarterback to a musician encapsulated the dreams and aspirations of the era. Moving to Los Angeles with his wife and young son in 1968, Sullivan immersed himself in the music scene, becoming a fixture at prestigious clubs and rubbing shoulders with Hollywood elites. Sullivan's musical career was marked by the release of his debut album, UFO, in 1969, a record that blended folk, rock, and country elements. Also in 1969, Sullivan was able to secure an uncredited role as a guitarist in the legendary film Easy Rider, largely due to his personal friendship with Dennis Hopper. Despite its innovative sound, the album, along with his 1972 follow-up Jim Sullivan, failed to achieve commercial success. Disheartened and with his personal life in turmoil, Sullivan set out for Nashville in March 1975, hoping for a fresh start and a chance to revive his music career. On March 4, 1975, Sullivan left Los Angeles, only to vanish in the New Mexico desert days later. His Volkswagen Beetle was found abandoned outside Santa Rosa, New Mexico, with his belongings intact, including unsold copies of his albums. In the day leading up to his disappearance, he was pulled over for a roadside sobriety test, which he apparently passed despite erratic driving. Reports indicate he was last seen at a remote ranch, with subsequent searches yielding no trace of him. Over the years, theories have abounded, from foul play to Sullivan becoming disoriented and lost, and even to speculation of alien abduction, fueled in part by the themes of his debut album. Other theories, which have no evidence whatsoever, is that he was slain by local police or the mafia. However, these appear to be the usual salacious rumors. Despite the lack of conclusive evidence regarding his fate, Sullivan's music has posthumously garnered a cult following, particularly the UFO album. Personally, I think this may be one of those rare cases where the missing person actually did go off to start a new life. Sullivan's music career had not worked out the way that he had hoped, and there is the suggestion that he may have been in some debt at the time of his disappearance. However, running counter to this, he had a wife and 2 young children who never heard from him again. The theory that he got lost and perished is also quite plausible, despite the lack of any hard evidence in favor of it. Sullivan disappeared in a remote region of New Mexico. He may have stepped away from his car to explore the terrain. While doing so, he may have become overwhelmed by the heat, become disoriented, and perished as a result. The SS Bannockburn. The SS Bannockburn, often referred to as the Flying Dutchman of the Great Lakes, has been shrouded in mystery since its disappearance in November 1902. This steel-hulled freighter, registered in Canada, was last seen during a severe winter storm on Lake Superior. Despite being a relatively new cutting-edge ship, the Bannockburn vanished without a trace after being sighted by the SS Algonquin. The only piece of wreckage ever recovered was a cork life preserver found on a beach, which provided no clues as to the ship's fate. Theories about the Bannockburn's disappearance range from a boiler explosion to the possibility of hitting the then uncharted Superior Shoal. However, the most plausible theory suggests that the ship's rudder broke, causing it to list in the waves before capsizing, a scenario that explains the lack of significant wreckage. The SS Bannockburn's disappearance has spawned a variety of paranormal explanations, primarily focusing on its reputed sightings long after its presumed sinking. These accounts have cemented its status as Lake Superior's Flying Dutchman, a ghost ship foretelling doom. One of the most famous stories involves the Walter A. Hitchinson, another ship, in 1947. The Bannockburn allegedly appeared during a storm, nearly colliding with the Hitchinson before vanishing after hitting rocks. The Bannockburn allegedly also appeared circa 2016, though details of this sighting are extremely difficult to find. Paranormal theories suggest that the ship is able to manifest during misty weather, adding to the spooky vibe associated with the Bannockburn. Another theory focuses on the lack of memorials for the lost sailors. 20 sailors went down with this ship. Despite this, the only memorial to exist is a brief memorial to the captain in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. Under this theory, the restless souls of the sailors seek to terrify the occupants of other ships to remind them that they exist. I note that it seems unlikely that the Bannockburn will be found at this point, given the depth of Lake Superior and the lack of popular interest in the wreck. The Dingo Neck. The Dingo Neck, first brought to public attention in the early 20th century, has been described as a bizarre mix of animal traits. It is said to be a blend of a leopard, a hippo, and an armadillo, but various other creatures have also been tossed into the mix. It is said to come from Central Africa, near Lake Victoria, where John Alfred Jordan, a big game hunter, recorded it in 1907. Jordan's account paints a vivid picture of a creature approximately 14 to 15 feet long, with a head resembling that of a leopard, and equipped with 2 long white fangs. It possessed a broad, scaled back and a finned tail, which it used to navigate the swift currents of the Magori River. Jordan's encounter, characterized by both awe and fear, concluded with a shot fired at the creature, which subsequently disappeared, leaving no trace despite extensive searches. Further validation of the Dingonec's existence came from Charles William Hobley in 1913, a respected naturalist who confirmed the creature was known to locals. Modern cryptozoology accounts of the creature attempt to downplay the obviously fabricated nature of the creature. One common suggestion is that the creature is actually a species of, quote, jungle walrus, with the walrus's rough skin explaining the scales of the creature. The dingoneck does not appear to be an actively sighted cryptid, and does not appear to have been seen for over 100 years at this point. I would speculate that the creature was invented by John Alfred Jordan, the big game hunter, perhaps to draw notoriety to himself. Unfortunately, there simply isn't enough information about Jordan out there to really speculate on his potential motivation. Also, it would appear that there was never any local tradition of the dingoneck, unlike other African cryptids, covered so far like the Nandi bear. The airship of Clonmacnoise. This one comes recommended by subscriber Lauren Redmond. Thanks for this interesting suggestion, Lauren. Remember to leave your own comments with suggestions. If your case is covered, I'll shout you out as well. The airship of Clonmacnoise, reported around the year 740 AD over Ireland, is potentially one of the first documented UFO sightings. Originating from ancient Irish annals, the story initially described ships with crews seen floating in the sky. Over the centuries, this narrative evolved, embellished by medieval chroniclers into a rich tapestry of miraculous occurrences and otherworldly phenomena. Various theories have been put forth to explain the phenomenon. Rationally based speculation ranges from the aurora borealis, mirages, and atmospheric distortions, which could account for the visual spectacle. More speculative theories suggest that this was a UFO sighting, or the possibility of a temporal warp. With respect to the temporal warp, the thought goes that the sighting was actually a plane from modern times, witnessed by pre-modern people. Not having the language to describe a plane, they would describe it as an airship with a crew. Unfortunately, there's not too much evidence surrounding this incident, so we're left almost entirely with speculation. Hollow Earth. The Hollow Earth theory is an enduring concept that posits that our planet is not a solid mass, but contains substantial internal spaces, or is entirely hollow. This idea, entwined with mythology, folklore, and speculative thought, has evolved over millennia, from ancient beliefs to modern-day conspiracy theories. Ancient civilizations across the globe harbored notions of subterranean realms that intersected with their beliefs in the afterlife and origin stories. The Greeks, Egyptians, and Mesopotamians had myths of underworlds accessible through caves or tunnels, serving as gateways to worlds beneath the Earth's surface. The scientific flirtation with Hollow Earth theory can be traced back to the late 17th century, when English astronomer Edmund Halley put forth a hypothesis. He proposed that the Earth consists of concentric shells rotating independently, attempting to explain anomalies in magnetic readings. However, despite this still being relied upon today, this was simply a hypothesis based upon evidence at the time. The theory took on new dimensions when it was claimed that Admiral Richard Byrd encountered entrances to the inner Earth during polar expeditions. The Hollow Earth theory appears to me to be scientifically impossible due to several factors. The study of earthquake waves clearly shows a solid and dynamic interior, consisting of the crust, mantle, outer core, and inner core, each with distinct properties and compositions. Earth's gravitational field, generated by its massive, dense core, further contradicts the possibility of a hollow structure. Additionally, the planet's magnetic field, generated by the movement of molten iron in the outer core, would not exist in a hollow Earth. Giant shrimp in the laundry room. Thanks to Discord user _frog for this truly bizarre cryptid suggestion. In 1948, An extraordinary encounter allegedly unfolded in Bremerton, Washington. Virginia Staples, a resident of the area, reported witnessing what has come to be known as the Bremerton giant shrimp within her apartment building's basement laundry room. This peculiar sighting first came to light through her personal account published in the 6th edition of Strange magazine. According to the original account, still published online by Strange magazine in archival form, the following occurred. While doing laundry, Virginia felt an eerie presence and saw a creature as tall as her, 5 feet, with a bright orange body, thin, spidery legs, and moving antenna. Terrified, she fled the apartment and immediately moved to Seattle, being so afraid to live in the area. She later sought to identify the creature at an aquarium, finding only a tiny shrimp resembling it. When she visited Bremerton years later to clarify the experience, the apartment had been torn down. The most common and obvious explanation for this cryptid and this incident is that it is simply a hoax. Perhaps the creature was invented by the writers at Strange magazine, who needed some additional content for an issue. Or perhaps Virginia, or the person purporting to be Virginia, faked the story. Other possibilities include a hallucination. I'm sure numerous people have seen giant crustaceans which aren't there over the years. Anyway, from my brief research into Strange magazine, this publication looks to be the pre-internet version of the multitude of paranormal subreddits or 4chan's X-board. That is to say, these are forums where the truth of an event is secondary to how interesting the event is. And I think I can speak for virtually all of us when I say that we all love a good giant shrimp in the basement laundry room story. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Also, check out the Patreon, my YouTube membership, and the Discord. Links are in the description. Huge thanks to all my YouTube members and patrons. Shout out to my patrons Noah Schubert, Kazak Cutie, Kurt the Squirt, Monoxide Wendigo, and Jeffer Metcalf. Big shout out to YouTube member Jordan All. Until next time, stay safe and healthy, and peace out. Welcome to part 16 of the Ultimate Unsolved Mysteries Iceberg. In this series, we deep dive cases including true crime, mysterious disappearances, myths and legends, strange events, cryptids, internet mysteries, and more. The slaying of Tomoko Takekawa. On the morning of March 10, 1959, an office worker found the body of a woman floating near the Miyashita Bridge over the Zenpukuji River in Tokyo's Suganami ward. Dressed in a green suit, silk blouse, and white undergarments, her belongings were scattered nearby. Initially suspected of drowning due to the absence of visible injuries and her missing shoes, an autopsy later indicated she might have been strangled, evidenced by marks on her neck. Fluids from 2 individuals were also detected, prompting a deeper investigation into her acquaintances. The deceased was identified as Tomoko Takekawa, a 27-year-old flight attendant from Ashiya City, Hyogo Prefecture. Raised Catholic, she moved to Tokyo for nursing school before working as a nurse in Ashiya, and then returning to Tokyo. Thanks to her influential uncle, she transitioned careers to become a stewardess for the British Overseas Airway Corporation. Takekawa was selected from among 300 applicants and was set to commence her first flight on March 13, 1959. But she disappeared after attending a birthday party on March 8th. Belgian-born Louis Charles Vermeersch, a Catholic priest, emerged as a suspect after Takekawa's notebook entries and a parcel linked him to her. Despite undergoing questioning and displaying signs of physical stress, Vermeersch denied any romantic involvement with Takekawa, stating their meeting was purely for consultation. However, police found evidence suggesting a prior relationship. Witnesses reported sightings of Vermeersch around the time of Takekawa's disappearance. Despite these allegations, Vermeersch's alibis, provided by church members, were met with skepticism. Just days before a scheduled police interview, Vermeersch left Japan on an Air France flight, claiming church orders and a desire to visit his aging parents. His departure left many questions unanswered, and despite never being formally charged, the cloud of suspicion never fully lifted. Vermeersch lived out his life in Canada, passing away in 2017 without making public comments on the case. Tomoko Takekawa's murder remains unsolved, officially closed by the police in 1974. It's unclear to me if the DNA evidence in this case was kept. However, given that the case was closed, I suspect that it may not have been. In my view, it looks as though Vermeersch was, at the very least, engaging in an inappropriate relationship with Tomoko. As a Catholic priest, Vermeersch was of course expected to be celibate. This may provide an explanation for why he left Japan prior to being interviewed. However, as to whether he played any part in her slaying, there doesn't appear to be any specific evidence in favor of that position. While the timing of his departure is suspicious, self-preservation is a strong instinct, especially when the alternative is being caught up in a foreign legal jurisdiction. Further, based on the evidence, it appears that the Japanese authorities may have focused their interest on Vermeersch. I note that the Japanese authorities do tend to blame criminality within Japan largely on foreigners. This fits the narrative that Japanese society is a safe and high-trust society, susceptible to threats from the outside. At any rate, my hope is that despite the closure of the case, DNA evidence has been kept, so that Tomoko's family can at least have some sense of closure. The Pope Lick Monster. The Pope Lick Monster, a cryptid of Kentucky folklore, resides near the Pope Lick Trestle. This creature, part man, part goat, and sometimes even part sheep, is said to reside beneath a railroad trestle bridge over Pope Lick Creek near Louisville, Kentucky. Over time, it has become a subject of legend, with various stories attempting to explain its existence and malevolent behavior. The origins of the Pope Lick Monster are as murky as the tales that surround it. Some stories suggest the creature is the result of a circus train accident that allowed a freak show specimen to escape, while others propose it might have origins in dark, supernatural forces. Another version posits it as a vengeful spirit or entity tied to the land itself, perhaps an amalgamation of local fears and the human penchant for creating monsters out of the unknown. Other theories propose that it is a local variation of the Wendigo. The legend suggests the creature can use voice mimicry to lure unsuspecting individuals onto the trestle, leading to tragic outcomes. Despite the trestle being an active railway line with heavy freight trains passing multiple times a day, the myth of the bridge being abandoned and safe to explore persists, often with fatal consequences. The physical and psychological danger posed by the trestle, coupled with the monster's lore, continues to attract thrill seekers and the curious despite widespread warnings of the very real risks involved. But back to the dangers associated with the Pope Lick Trestle. This fictional cryptid unfortunately boasts an extremely real and horrifying body count. The tragic allure of the Pope Lick Monster legend has led to several fatal incidents at the Pope Creek train trestle. In 1988, 17-year-old J.C. Baum lost his life to an oncoming train, and another individual was injured in the same attempt to traverse the trestle. 6 years later, a man met his demise after his ATV flipped on the tracks, leaving him stranded in the path of an oncoming train. In 2000, a 19-year-old's life was cut short after he fell from the trestle while hunting the Goat Man. He was struck by a passing train. Another incident occurred on April 23, 2016, when a 26-year-old woman was struck and killed by a train in her quest for the monster. The woman's boyfriend narrowly escaped death by clinging to the trestle's edge. The dangers of the trestle were highlighted again on May 26, 2019, when 15-year-old Savannah Bright died at the site. Her friend also suffered serious but non-life-threatening injuries in the same incident. Given the dangers associated with the purported stomping grounds of this cryptid, I would strongly urge potential thrill seekers to simply not seek the creature out. Did Hitler escape Berlin to South America in 1945? The narrative of Hitler's escape to South America post-World War II is a conspiracy theory that has intrigued the public for decades. Despite the lack of concrete evidence to support these claims, the theory continues to persist in popular culture. The theory posits that rather than meeting his end in 1945 within the confines of his Berlin bunker, Hitler, alongside his companion Eva Braun, managed to flee to South America. This speculation is fueled by various accounts and supposed sightings, contributing to a sprawling web of conjectures and stories. Further supporting these theories are two additional facts. First, prior to World War II, many Latin American countries had large populations of German immigrants and German descendants. These communities could have provided significant cover for Hitler and Braun to blend in. Second, these Latin American countries often had governments which were, let's just say, sympathetic to the Nazi cause. The origins of this theory can be traced back to the immediate post-war period. The ambiguity surrounding Hitler's fate, coupled with the onset of the Cold War, provided fertile ground for rumors and disinformation. Soviet disinformation campaigns, alongside genuine curiosity and skepticism about the official narratives, further muddied the waters. A British investigation undertaken immediately after the war concluded that Hitler and Eva Braun did indeed end themselves in the bunker. Adding fuel to the fire, the CIA has investigated this issue and was unable to reach the definitive conclusion of the British. Declassified CIA documents have shown that the agency explored the possibility of Hitler living incognito in Latin America, lending a semblance of credibility to the escape theory. However, these documents simply maintain the possibility of him living in South America and do not have actual evidence in favor of it. Dwight Eisenhower, the Supreme Allied Commander, expressed concern with respect to Hitler's potential survival in the post-war years. Eyewitness accounts and historical consensus uphold the belief that Hitler died in his bunker in 1945. Despite the lack of credible evidence and the dismissal of the escape theory by mainstream historians, the narrative continues to captivate the imagination of many. This begs the question, why is this theory still so popular? I would suggest that the main reason for the popularity of the theory is that Hitler and the Nazis are familiar to virtually everybody, regardless of general historical knowledge. Combine this with the larger-than-life figure created by the Nazi propaganda machine, it seems virtually inconceivable to some that Hitler could have died in the way he did. In a footnote to this entry, the History Channel was somehow able to make a 3-season program stretching over the course of 24 episodes discussing this topic. They really must have been running thin on legitimate content. By what? Episode 2 or 3? The disappearance of Angelisa Rivera Ruiz. Okay, so before I get into this case, I would like to say that I've noticed a very disturbing trend in my research for this series. Some missing persons cases simply get no traction whatsoever at all. No news articles, nothing. Just a simple entry on NamUs, the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System. Anyway, since this platform is growing, I want to bring more attention to these cases. Angelisa Rivera Ruiz, 24, vanished on November 16, 2020, in Zion, Illinois. Her last known location was near a Walmart at 4000 Route 173 in Zion, where she was observed running into a nearby forest. Angelisa was at the Walmart with a friend on the day she disappeared. After receiving a phone call, she stepped outside the store and was subsequently seen sprinting into the adjacent wooded area. That was the last time anyone saw or heard from her. At the moment she went missing, Angelisa had no cash, lacked a winter jacket, and had no means of transport. I note that details surrounding her disappearance are highly disturbing, suggesting the call may have presented an imminent threat to her life. Attempts to reach Angelisa via her cell phone have been unsuccessful. Search teams with dogs explored the forest where she was last spotted, yet they didn't discover any sign of her presence. According to Name Us, Angelisa has connections in Chicago and Plano, Illinois, as well as Memphis, Tennessee. The fate and whereabouts of Angelisa Rivera Ruiz are still a mystery, and her disappearance case remains open and unresolved. If you have any information with respect to this case, I urge you to reach out to Zion Police Department. Jimmy here, the YouTuber behind the Lazy Chill Zone channel, asking a quick favor. If you're enjoying my content, please hit the like and subscribe buttons, and the notification bell. My goal is to create the most expansive Iceberg series in YouTube history, and I want you all along for the ride. Also, consider signing up for a YouTube membership, joining the Patreon, and joining the Discord. In terms of YouTube memberships and the Patreon, every little bit helps, and your funding allows me to keep up the pace creating high-quality content for you. Also, if you're inclined, check out the merch store and pick something cool up while also supporting the channel. The Slaying of Inajiro Asanuma. On October 12, 1960, Japan witnessed a shocking event that would be remembered for decades: the assassination of Inajiro Asanuma, the chairman of the Japan Socialist Party. Adding to the shock, the slaying took place during a live televised debate at Hibiya Public Hall in Tokyo. This event, perpetrated by 17-year-old Otoya Yamaguchi, a right-wing ultranationalist, highlighted the intense ideological divisions within the country during the Cold War era. Inajiro Asanuma was a controversial figure, known for his outspoken support of socialism and his opposition to Japan's security treaty with the United States. He advocated for closer ties with the People's Republic of China. Further, he declared the United States as the shared enemy of China and Japan during a visit to Beijing in 1959. Asanuma's radical stance made him a target for right-wing groups who viewed his policies as a threat to the traditional Japanese way of life and the imperial system. Yamaguchi, who belonged to a right-wing nationalist group, saw Asanuma's actions and statements as unforgivable betrayals of Japan's national interests. On the day of the assassination, Yamaguchi infiltrated a large crowd at the debate, armed with a wakizashi, a form of Japanese short sword often mistaken for a katana. His attack on Asanuma was swift and fatal, striking him in the left side and causing internal bleeding that led to his death within minutes. The slaying was not only a tragic moment but also a spectacle that was broadcast to millions, leaving an indelible mark on the national consciousness. The aftermath of Asanuma's assassination was tumultuous. The incident sparked massive protests, with thousands taking to the streets to demand accountability and express their outrage. The political crisis threatened to destabilize the government, prompting then Prime Minister Ikeda to deliver a glowing memorial speech despite political differences. Despite this, Yamaguchi's act was not without its supporters. He became a martyr to some right-wing groups who viewed his actions as a heroic defense of traditional Japanese values. Yamaguchi's imprisonment and subsequent self-ending 3 weeks after the slaying added another layer of complexity to the tragedy. His final note, written with toothpaste on his cell wall, expressed a fanatical devotion to the emperor and a willingness to sacrifice his life for his country. So now you're asking the obvious question: what's the mystery here? Well, not everything is wrapped up in a nice, neat little package. There is significant speculation that Yamaguchi did not act alone, and that he may have been part of a broader ultranationalist conspiracy theory. Yamaguchi vehemently denied acting in concert with a group. However, the truth of the matter died with him. Unfortunately, my access to Japanese sources is limited, and also limited to auto translations, which are quite frankly not great for Japanese. That said, I suspect that ultra-nationalist groups were heavily infiltrated by law enforcement officers during the time period in question. If Yamaguchi was acting in concert as part of a larger conspiracy, I suspect the conspirators would have been at best a small group. Further, while the Japanese socialist movement withered following this slaying, I would imagine that more senior ultra-nationalists were acutely aware of the risk of the opposite. This slaying could have very easily bolstered the resolve of the socialist movement in Japan. That said, a 17-year-old hyped up on nationalist fervor was unlikely to consider this. As such, I'm of the opinion that Yamaguchi most likely did act alone. However, again, my access to Japanese sources is limited. If you've got access to Japanese sources and have studied the case in the original language, I would love to hear from you in the comments, especially since I want to do a long-form video on this event. The Bloody Mary Summoning Ritual. The urban legend of Bloody Mary conjures images of shadowy figures and whispered secrets in darkened rooms. Central to this chilling tale is the ritual of summoning a spectral entity through a mirror in a dimly lit space. Participants are always required to recite an incantation, which includes some repeating versions of the name Bloody Mary. The ritual taps into deep-seated fears and the human fascination with the supernatural, making it a staple of slumber parties and dares for generations. The origins of the Bloody Mary legend are as murky as the stories themselves, with several historical figures speculated to be the inspiration behind this ghostly apparition. Among them are Mary Worth, purportedly a witch executed for her dark arts; Elizabeth Bathory, the notorious Blood Countess, known for her allegedly gruesome crimes and covered in a previous entry, is another candidate. Queen Mary of England is perhaps the most commonly cited source of this apparition. Her reign was marked by her attempts to re-establish Catholicism and the resultant execution of numerous Protestants, earning her the moniker Bloody Mary in her lifetime. Her efforts to restore Catholicism in England, after her father, Henry VIII, established the Church of England, left a strong cultural memory. That said, despite numerous candidates being named, Bloody Mary's legend is too widespread to be tied to a single historical individual specifically. But what about the actual urban legend itself? How come so many otherwise rational and put-together people have had experiences with Bloody Mary? One potential explanation is that they did have legitimate paranormal experiences. However, it isn't necessary to delve into the paranormal to explain Bloody Mary. Looking into a mirror with low lighting for an extended time can lead to visual distortions akin to hallucinations. One might observe their facial features warping, vanishing, shifting, or even transforming. This suggests a real scientific basis for the Bloody Mary illusion, since it is always done in low light in front of a mirror. Another explanation for Bloody Mary is mass psychogenic illness. Bloody Mary rituals are often performed at slumber parties, where the participants are primed for a paranormal or supernatural experience. If an individual believes that others are experiencing a phenomenon when reciting the Bloody Mary summoning ritual, they will be more likely to experience this as well. Just a quick aside, and putting aside the reality of paranormal issues in general for a minute. Finding out that our beliefs in urban legends and ghosts is supported by actual neurocognitive and psychological science and understanding is extremely satisfying. Since this is part 16 of this series and you're still watching, I'm thinking you may agree with me as well. The dark side of the rainbow. The theory known as dark side of the rainbow posits a fascinating synchronicity between Pink Floyd's 1973 album, The Dark Side of the Moon, and the 1939 film, The Wizard of Oz. According to enthusiasts, when the album is played alongside the film, numerous moments of apparent correspondence between the two emerge, creating a unique viewing and listening experience. This phenomenon was first brought to widespread attention through a detailed examination by journalist Charlie Savage. Further, it was Savage who coined the catchy term, "dark side of the rainbow." His findings sparked a surge of interest, leading to extensive analysis by fans. I found that three particular moments are routinely cited as proof of this theory. Breathe, with Dorothy's balance. As the song Breathe plays, Dorothy is seen performing a tightrope-like walk. The lyrical mention of balance coincides with her careful steps, suggesting a thematic link between the song's message and Dorothy's actions at that moment. The song Time and Dorothy's running sequence. The transition in the film to Dorothy running away from home to save Toto aligns with the line, "No one told you when to run," from the song Time. This lyrical and visual pairing enhances the thematic resonance of the moment, with the concept of time and urgency reflected both in song and on screen. Brain Damage and the Scarecrow's scene. The album's track, Brain Damage, starts playing almost simultaneously with the movie's If I Only Had a Brain scene. The song's lyrics, mentioning lunacy and paths, seem to mirror the Scarecrow's erratic behavior and quest for a brain. Despite the compelling instances of synchronicity cited by fans, Pink Floyd and their production team have consistently denied any intentional connection. David Gilmour, Pink Floyd's guitarist and vocalist, has dismissed the theory as the product of someone with too much time on their hands. Nick Mason, the band's drummer, humorously suggested that the album was actually based on The Sound of Music rather than The Wizard of Oz. Alan Parsons, an engineer on The Dark Side of the Moon, echoed these sentiments, stating that any synchronicity was coincidental. In favor of this, Parsons delivered the quote, "killing blow" to the theory, highlighting the technical impossibility of intentionally syncing the album with the film. According to Parsons, given the lack of VCRs at the time of the album's production, they could not have been synced up. I suppose, though, when you're Pink Floyd, you don't need a VCR and you could rent a projector in a theater. But why? I think the real magic of The Dark Side of the Rainbow is the incredible synchronicity that arose completely unplanned by anyone. Mongolian death worm. Just a quick preface before I start this one. Keep an open mind on this cryptid. This is one of the few that may actually exist in some form close to its description. Nestled within the vast, unforgiving expanse of the Gobi Desert, a sinister cryptid is said to lurk, the Mongolian death worm. Known in Mongolia as Olgoi Korkoi, which translates to intestine worm, this cryptid is reputed for its deadly capabilities and elusive nature. The creature is described as resembling a cow's intestine, a sausage-like entity, approximately 2 feet long, devoid of a discernible head or legs. Legends assert that mere contact with this being results in instant death, a claim that underscores the fear and respect it commands within the Gobi's vast landscapes. Historical accounts of the Mongolian death worm date back to the early 20th century, when Western explorers first documented local tales of this fearsome entity. The most notable of these was Roy Chapman Andrews, whose encounters with Mongolian officials in the 1920s revealed a profound belief in the worm's existence, despite no physical evidence. These officials described it minutely, with one even claiming knowledge of a man who had seen the worm and survived to recount his tale. Despite numerous expeditions aimed at uncovering the truth behind this legendary creature, concrete evidence of its existence remains elusive. Notably, Czech cryptozoologist Ivan Mackerly dedicated significant portions of his life to this quest, employing innovative methods inspired by the novel Dune. And when I'm saying a significant portion of his life, Mackerly conducted 3 full expeditions to Mongolia, taking place in 1990, 1992, and 2004. Speculation on the deathworm's biological nature has led some to suggest it could be a misidentified or yet to be discovered species. Common speculation includes a type of limbless lizard or skink adapted to the desert's harsh conditions. Others propose it might share characteristics with known venomous creatures, capable of spitting venom or emitting electric shocks to incapacitate its prey or defend itself. Given the vastness and emptiness of the Gobi Desert, and given that there is nothing inherently fantastical about the Mongolian deathworm, I'm going to come out and say this one could exist. And this isn't like the skunk ape, where it could exist as a released orangutan or something. There is a non-zero chance that a creature fitting the description of the Mongolian deathworm could actually exist. Okay, so take a moment to hear me out. The Mongolian deathworm's existence, while unproven, aligns with precedents of animals once deemed mythical, but later discovered. The giant squid, for instance, was a maritime legend until real evidence emerged in the 19th century, showcasing how additional exploration can validate folklore. Similarly, the okapi, once a creature of African legend, was officially recognized by science in the early 20th century, underlining the possibility of undiscovered species in remote areas. The vast, uncharted expanses of the Gobi Desert provide a plausible habitat for such an undiscovered creature, mirroring these analogous cases where species remained hidden until technological and exploratory advancements allowed for their discovery. Given the challenging terrain and the desert's sheer size, it's conceivable that the deathworm, like the giant squid and okapi, could exist. Is the Mongolian deathworm likely to exist? That's a firm no. Is the Mongolian deathworm plausible, unlike the vast majority of other land-based cryptids? That's a firm yes. Anyway, let's solve this one for Ivan Mackerly. That dude was an absolute legend. The disappearance of Carl Robert Schull. This case is a recommendation from Discord member Black Rabbit. Originally from Wyoming, Schull had moved to Colorado in early 2012, aiming to invest in the burgeoning pot industry. His last confirmed sighting was on November 28, 2013, under circumstances that soon led to more questions than answers. Schull's sudden disappearance followed a heated argument with his business partner, after which he was never heard from again. The case took a perplexing turn when Schull's debit card was utilized at an Aurora gas station on the day he vanished, albeit not by him. Subsequent transactions occurred across different locations, including Elise, Nebraska, and Fort Morgan, Colorado, and culminated in a $70 dinner purchase at a steakhouse in Aurora. Notably, surveillance footage captured a man using Schull's card to buy cigarettes and signing Schull's name, yet this individual was not Schull. Authorities speculated that Schull might have been traveling with his dog, a blue heeler named Bez, possibly in a Chevrolet S10 pickup truck with Wyoming plates. Despite exhaustive efforts by both Colorado and Wyoming law enforcement, Schull's fate remains unknown, and foul play has been suspected. Unfortunately, there's not too much information out there on Carl Robert Schull. Again, this is one of these missing persons cases that is so important to profile, given that even a small bit of awareness to the case can make all the difference. If you have information, please reach out to the Aurora, Colorado Police Department or the Casper, Wyoming Police Department, the Kentucky Meat Shower. In March of 1876, a peculiar and unprecedented event occurred in Bath County, Kentucky, an occurrence that would come to be known as the Kentucky Meat Shower. On a clear, sunny morning, residents of the area witnessed what appeared to be chunks of meat falling from the sky. This bizarre shower spanned an area of approximately 100 by 50 yards and lasted for several minutes, leaving behind pieces of meat that ranged in size. Some of these pieces were as light as snowflakes, and others were up to 3 inches in length. The event quickly garnered national attention, with newspapers like the New York Times and Scientific American reporting on the phenomenon. Theories about its cause ranged from the plausible to the downright fantastical. Initial speculation included everything from the meat being a type of cyanobacteria that expands into a jelly-like mass when wet, to more eccentric ideas such as a meteor shower of meat. The most widely accepted explanation, however, involves a flock of vultures. And trust me, there's a reason this is the last video on this list. So yeah, as you probably guessed, this is going to get really weird really fast. Vultures are known to regurgitate their food when they need to make a quick escape. The theory posits that a group of vultures flying over the area might have vomited their stomach contents while in flight, leading to the meat shower. This theory is supported by the known behaviors of vultures and the types of meat found, which included lung tissue, muscle, and cartilage, suggesting a variety of animals could have been the source. Despite the plausibility of the vulture theory, the Kentucky meat shower remains one of the more curious incidents in American folklore. Also, quick aside, the Kentucky meat shower sounds like a shock video that circulated the internet circa 2005. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Also, make sure to leave a comment as well. I read all comments and try to respond to most. Also, check out my Patreon at patreon.com/lazychillzone. In the alternative, check out the YouTube membership and sign up for cool perks. Signing up for the Patreon and the YouTube membership help me devote way more time to creating content for you. Shout out to my patrons Noah Schubert, Kazakh Cutie, Kurt the Squirt, Monoxide Wendigo, and Jeffer Metcalf. Also, big shout out to YouTube shout out tier member Jordan All. Until next time, stay healthy and peace out. Welcome to part 17 of the Ultimate Unsolved Mysteries Iceberg. In this series, we deep dive cases including true crime, mysterious disappearances, myths and legends, strange events, cryptids, internet mysteries, and more. The disappearance of Nikki McCown. The disappearance of Nikki McCown, a 28-year-old woman from Richmond, Indiana, continues to mystify investigators. Nikki vanished under mysterious circumstances on July 22, 2001, just weeks before her scheduled wedding. On that day, after attending church with her daughter and fiancé, she went to a local laundromat to wash her clothes. Despite returning once to drop off her daughter and heading back to the laundromat, she was never seen again. Nikki McCown was a corrections officer at a local prison and a devoted mother to her 9-year-old daughter, Peyton. She was eagerly preparing for her new life with her fiancé, Bobby Webster, a high school sweetheart with whom she had rekindled a relationship. However, her sudden disappearance left her family and friends in a state of shock and despair. The initial investigation into Nikki's disappearance explored multiple leads, including her relationship with her fiancé and a mysterious encounter at the laundromat where she was last seen. According to reports, Nikki had complained about being harassed by some men at the laundromat. Although this lead was investigated, it did not result in any significant breakthrough in the case. Suspicion initially fell on her fiancé, Bobby Webster, especially after his actions following Nikki's disappearance raised eyebrows. He was reported to have attempted to return the engagement ring for a refund and canceled the wedding venue, actions that many found suspicious. However, he was eventually ruled out by the authorities. Bobby Webster explained that he took these actions so he could fund the campaign to increase awareness of Nikki's case. Personally, I'm surprised that so many people saw these actions as suspicious, and to me this seems like the actions of a devoted fiancé. The case took a significant turn when, in November 2001, Nikki's vehicle was found in Dayton, Ohio, at an apartment complex where she had previously resided with an ex-boyfriend. Although the vehicle contained her folded laundry, there was no trace of Nikki herself, and the car offered no forensic evidence to advance the investigation. Her ex-boyfriend, who lived at the complex and had an alibi, was also cleared of suspicion. Police suspected that the person who left the car there did so because he knew that the ex-boyfriend resided in the area. The investigation later focused on Tommy Swint, a co-worker of Nikki's at the prison. Swint later went on to become a police officer in 2007, but only served in this capacity for 2 months. Swint suddenly resigned from the police department upon being revealed as a person of interest in Nikki's case, adding to the suspicion placed on him. In February 2010, police moved on Swint to arrest him for the slaying of a paid companionship worker in 1991. Swint apparently decided that the possibility of life in prison for a former prison guard and cop was not appealing, and decided to impose the death penalty on himself during the arrest attempt. Unfortunately, by doing so, he denied the police the ability to further question him in relation to Nikki's disappearance. Peyton, Nikki's daughter, is now grown up and continues to search for answers in her mother's disappearance. She's given a load of interviews about the case and is a great advocate for her mom's case and other missing people as well. It's very heartening to see someone affected by such a tragedy remain strong and act so courageously. If you have any information with respect to the Nikki McCown case, please contact the Richmond Police Department with details. The disappearance of Ralph Hendry and Kathy Brandel has sparked widespread attention and concern. The couple, seasoned sailors, were enjoying a winter cruising adventure in the Caribbean when they vanished. Their last known location was near Grand Anse Beach in Grenada on February 18, 2024. Ralph and Kathy, both experienced sailors, had been living on their yacht for over a decade, embracing the sea as their home. They were participating in a leisurely cruise through the Eastern Caribbean after completing a significant sailing event from Virginia to Antigua. Their yacht, SV Simplicity, was later found abandoned and in disarray 80 miles from the original location, hinting at a sudden and alarming incident. Further cementing extreme concerns, evidence on the yacht included bloodstains. The timing of their disappearance coincided with a prison break in Grenada, leading authorities to speculate about and then confirm a possible connection. 3 prisoners identified as Trayvon Robertson, Abita Stanislaus, and Ron Mitchell escaped and fled using the yacht. The 3 escapees were later recaptured and extensively interrogated about their involvement. The Grenadan police chief initially stated on February 21, 2024, that the couple had been, quote, disposed of by the criminals. However, a later clarification on February 26, 2024 indicates a possibility of survival. That said, hope is fading daily, and American news outlets are generally reporting now that American authorities believe the couple to be slain. Per the latest news on February 27, 2024, the St. Vincent Coast Guard continues their search efforts for the couple, even though they're presumed slain. That said, at present, the search continues, and there is an extremely slim chance that they may still be alive. I'll have an update on this case in a later entry in this series, once more is known. The Connecticut River Valley Killer. The Connecticut River Valley case revolves around a series of tragic events that took place from the late 1970s through the 1980s along the border of New Hampshire and Vermont. The perpetrator, known as the Connecticut River Valley Killer, or simply the Valley Killer, is linked to multiple incidents where women were targeted and slain. One notable incident involved Eva Marie Morse, a single mother last seen hitchhiking in Charlestown, New Hampshire in 1985. Her remains were later discovered near Unity, New Hampshire. The case of Linda Moore presents another horrifying scenario. She was attacked in her home in Saxtons River, Vermont, in 1986. Witnesses provided a description leading to a composite sketch of a suspect, but no arrests were made. Another victim, Barbara Agnew, disappeared after a skiing outing and was found months later in a state that indicated a violent struggle. On the night of August 6, 1988, 22-year-old Jane Borowski, who was pregnant, survived a brutal attack after stopping at a closed convenience store in West Swansea, New Hampshire. After being approached and forcibly removed from her car by a man who falsely accused her of harming his girlfriend, Borowski was stabbed a total of 27 times. Despite severe injuries, including a severed jugular vein, collapsed lungs, and lacerations, she managed to drive for help and later provided crucial details for the investigation, including a composite sketch of her attacker. Remarkably, despite this heinous and cowardly attack, her unborn daughter miraculously survived. Borowski remains the sole survivor of the assailant's known attacks. The serial killer, apparently spooked by Borowski's survival, is not known to have struck again. Investigations have explored various theories and suspects. Michael Nicolaou has attracted significant attention due to his violent history and connections to the areas where the incidents occurred. The similarities between Nicolaou's known actions and the circumstances of the attacks have led some to consider him a prime suspect, although conclusive evidence remains elusive. However, in 2005, Michael, the lead suspect, slew his wife before rendering himself, formerly living by his own hand. Unfortunately, I don't imagine that this case will ever be formally solved. But on the bright side, I don't think this killer poses any additional threat. Hey everyone, it's Jimmy, the creator behind the Lazy Chill Zone channel. If you're enjoying my content, please hit the like and subscribe buttons and the notification bell. As I've said before, my goal is to create the most expansive Iceberg series in YouTube history, and I want you all along for the ride. Also, consider signing up for a YouTube membership, joining the Patreon, and joining the Discord. In particular, joining on for a YouTube membership or joining the Patreon helps me spend more time devoted to this channel. Also, check out the merch store and pick something cool up while also supporting the channel. The disappearance of Peter Dimitrov. This story, which has received virtually no attention in the English-speaking world, was brought to my notice by Bulgarian subscriber Georgi Staikov. Unfortunately, there are very few sources on this in English, and automatic translation from Bulgarian is horrid. However, given that Dimitrov may be missing in the US, I feel that it's necessary to cover this case regardless. Peter Dimitrov visited the U.S. Embassy in Sofia for a visa interview as part of his plans to participate in a work and travel program in the United States. However, his visa application was denied. He was expected to meet friends outside the embassy, but he never arrived. His phone has been inactive since that day. Surveillance footage confirmed Peter's entry into the embassy, yet there is no evidence of him leaving the premises. Given the lack of sources, it is unclear to me how thorough the surveillance is at the U.S. Embassy in Sofia. However, I would assume it to be quite fulsome given that it's a U.S. embassy. My understanding, admittedly through translated sources, is that some believe that he ended himself immediately after the denial. A body was found nearby, which the authorities initially assumed to be Peter's, putting investigations on hold during the crucial phase after his disappearance. However, subsequent DNA testing confirmed that this was not Peter's body. Another theory is that Peter may have illegally immigrated to the United States. However, I was able to locate an interview with Peter's father, Vladimir, circa 2010, who was adamant that this could not be the case, though his reasoning for this was not sound. Vladimir said that his son could not afford it. However, he clearly had enough to at least afford a plane ticket. And circa 2010, Peter could have easily met a Bulgarian connection in the US online. At any rate, Peter Dimitrov's case remains a complete mystery at this time. If Peter is still alive, it would appear that he is likely living somewhere in Europe or the United States. The death dealer of Kaunas. The Lytukis Garage Massacre, part of the wider Kaunas pogrom, represents just one chapter of the Holocaust. On June 27, 1941, in Kaunas, Lithuania, a horrific act was committed against the Jewish population. As the Wehrmacht advanced, they were followed by SS killing squads, tasked primarily with eliminating the local Jewish population. In this climate of terror, local Lithuanian nationalists, emboldened by the Nazi presence, perpetrated a truly brutal massacre. Over 50 Jewish individuals were tortured and slain in a spectacle of violence that was both public and profoundly shocking. The crowd of onlookers, which included women and children, cheered as each individual was mercilessly beaten to death with a crowbar by a figure infamously known as the death dealer of Kaunas. This sinister figure, amidst the slaughter, at one point paused to play the Lithuanian national anthem on an accordion while standing on top of the pile of corpses of Jewish men he had just slain. The identity of the death dealer remains shrouded in mystery and controversy. Despite various theories, no conclusive evidence has solidified the true identity of this individual. Some speculate that he was a local nationalist, released from prison by the advancing German forces, who took a leading role in the violence. This theory aligns with the known facts that the Einsatzgruppen encouraged local populations to participate in the pogroms, effectively mobilizing anti-Semitic sentiments among the local populace. Another theory states that his family was slain by the withdrawing Soviet forces, leading to his apparent justification of the mass slayings. Another theory suggests that the individual in the picture is Joachim Heymann, a German SS officer, and that he was the death dealer of Kaunas. However, based on multiple eyewitness testimonies confirming the details of the events, including the testimony of the photographer, this theory has been discredited. Yet another theory suggests that there may have been nothing in particularly anti-Semitic about the man, that he perhaps just enjoyed being given the freedom to kill people without consequence. Or perhaps not even without consequence, but while being lauded as a hero by the locals for doing so. At this point, it appears unlikely that the identity of the death dealer of Kaunas will ever be known definitively. Phantom kangaroos. Phantom kangaroos represent sightings of kangaroos or kangaroo-like creatures in regions where they are not native and where no zoological evidence can validate their existence. These sightings, often described in detail, have been reported across various parts of the world, including the United States, the United Kingdom, France, and Japan. In the United States, the history of phantom kangaroo sightings dates back to the late 19th century. The first documented instance occurred in Richmond, Wisconsin, in 1899, where a woman reported seeing a large kangaroo leaping around her backyard during a large storm. Interestingly, no kangaroos were reported missing from any nearby circuses, which were prevalent at the time, adding mystery to the sighting. That said, it is questionable whether a missing kangaroo would have been reported to the authorities, as there may have been consequences for releasing a kangaroo. Further, the police records of such a report may have been destroyed in the meantime. The United Kingdom has witnessed its share of mysterious marsupials as well. Documented colonies of red-necked wallabies exist, notably one that established itself in Staffordshire in the 1930s after escaping from a private zoo. Although the population peaked in the 1970s, sightings have continued sporadically into the 21st century, including a rare albino wallaby in Northamptonshire in 2015. One of the more chilling accounts occurred in South Pittsburgh, Tennessee, in 1934, where a kangaroo-like creature was witnessed killing and partially devouring several animals over a 5-day period. Despite a search party tracking the creature to a cave, it was never found, leaving no evidence of its existence aside from eyewitness accounts. I'm just going to go out on a limb and suggest that this probably wasn't a kangaroo. The 1970s brought a wave of sightings in the Midwest, particularly Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin, with multiple reports of kangaroos hopping at high speeds through fields and wooded areas. Despite extensive searches, none of these kangaroos were ever captured either physically or on camera. Phantom kangaroo sightings are not limited to rural areas. In 1974, 2 Chicago police officers were called to investigate a kangaroo standing on someone's porch. Although they located the animal, it eluded capture and continued to be sighted across Illinois and neighboring states. I suspect this was likely a kangaroo escaped from a private collection or perhaps a local circus. Sightings of phantom kangaroos continue on till the present day. My take on this one: all these sightings were viral marketing for the film Kangaroo Jack. The disappearance of Oscar Acosta. Oscar Zeta Acosta, a notable Mexican-American attorney, activist, and writer, vanished under mysterious circumstances in May 1974 while in Sinaloa in Mexico. His disappearance remains unresolved, marked by an absence of concrete evidence and a body that has never been recovered. Acosta's life prior to this event was marked by a series of professional achievements and personal challenges. He transitioned from a military career to law, eventually passing the bar in 1966. His activism within the Chicano movement and legal representation of marginalized communities in East LA highlighted his commitment to his community. However, Acosta is best known for his complex relationship with Hunter S. Thompson. The two met in 1967 and quickly became entangled in professional and personal interactions that would influence Thompson's work, notably Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Acosta criticized Thompson for misrepresenting his ethnicity, portraying him as Samoan rather than Mexican, and appropriating his experiences for literary gain. The theories surrounding Acosta's disappearance are varied, reflecting the turbulent life he led. His son, Marco Acosta, speculated that his father's confrontational nature could have led to a fatal altercation. In his last conversation with his son, Acosta advised Marco that he was going to board a boat full of white snow. I don't think I need to offer any additional commentary on that quote. I'll just leave it as it stands. Hunter S. Thompson explored several possibilities, including foul play by drug dealers or political adversaries, reflecting Acosta's contentious relationships and substance abuse issues. Others have speculated that Acosta may have died from an overdose while on the trip. Still others have theorized that he may have simply started a new life in Mexico. Oscar Acosta is presumed dead, but is still legally classified as missing. If he is alive today, he would be 89 years old. The death of Bugsy Siegel. Benjamin Bugsy Siegel was born to poor Eastern European Jewish immigrants in Brooklyn, New York in 1906. By his teens, he had launched a profitable protection racket and amassed a significant criminal record. Siegel, known for his violent streak, gained notoriety and the nickname Bugsy, which he detested. With connections like Al Capone and an alliance with Meyer Lansky, he became a leading hitman for the National Crime Syndicate. Despite successes, Siegel faced several assassination attempts and relocated to California, where he expanded into gambling, drugs, and paid companionship, mingling with Hollywood elites. Siegel is even reported to have met with Hermann Göring and high-ranking Nazis on a trip to Italy, a meeting which has been all but confirmed by historians. Needless to say, the high-ranking Nazis were likely not informed about Bugsy Siegel's Jewish background. In 1945, Siegel moved to Las Vegas to develop the Flamingo Hotel and Casino, marking the start of the luxury Vegas Strip. On June 20th, 1947, an assassin shot Siegel through the window of his Beverly Hills home, striking him twice in the head, instantly killing him. His death remains quote-unquote unsolved till this day. Siegel's demise has been shrouded in mystery and speculation, with various theories circulating about the identity and motive of his assailant. The most prominent theory suggests that his death was a mob-sanctioned hit due to massive cost overruns and suspicions of embezzlement during the construction of the Flamingo Hotel. The theory posits that mob figures, possibly including close ally Meyer Lansky, ordered the hit due to Siegel's misuse of their funds. This narrative aligns with mob practices and the internal politics that governed organized crime. Others suggest that the killing may have been retribution for any one of the numerous killings associated with Siegel. Another theory is that he was killed by his girlfriend's brothers, or her associates. Bugsy Siegel was dating Virginia Hill, an influential figure in the mob, and was rumored to be abusive towards her. Anyway, all that said, this is yet another case that I imagine will never be solved with any degree of certainty. 100-man killing contest. The 100-man killing contest refers to an alleged competition between two Japanese officers, Toshiaki Mukai and Tsuyoshi Noda, during the Japanese invasion of China. This event was initially reported by the Tokyo Nichinichi Shimbun, capturing the brutality of the contest, where the two men purportedly vied to eliminate 100 people using swords. The historical veracity and details of this event have been the subject of extensive debate and scrutiny. The contest came to significant public attention in Japan in the 1970s due to the investigative journalism of Katsuichi Honda, who published a series of articles based on interviews with Chinese survivors. His reporting rekindled interest in the Nanjing massacre and sparked fierce debate about Japan's wartime conduct and the nature of the reported killing contest. Critics and scholars have since debated the accuracy of the contest's portrayal, with some considering it a fabrication, while others consider it an exaggeration influenced by wartime propaganda and sensational journalism. The impact of this event on Japanese culture and media was profound. It highlighted the role of thrills and speed in wartime reporting, as Japanese reporters sought to cover the war in a manner that would captivate and horrify the home audience. This led to the creation of such kill count stories and other grotesque media spectacles that were part of the broader cultural transformation during total war. Following the war, the detailed accounts of the so-called 100-man killing contest were documented and became part of the evidence cataloged by the International Military Tribunal for the Far East. This was a significant development, as the tribunal aimed to address the war crimes committed in the Asia-Pacific region during World War II. In the aftermath of the war, in the year 1947, the United States Army apprehended the two Japanese soldiers implicated in the contest, Toshiaki Mukai and Tsuyoshi Noda. They were subsequently held in custody at Sugamo Prison, a facility known for detaining war criminals. The subsequent legal proceedings saw Mukai and Noda extradited to China, where they faced charges in front of the Nanjing War Crimes Tribunal. This court was tasked with addressing the egregious violations of international law that occurred during the invasion and occupation of Nanjing. Alongside Mukai and Noda stood Gunkichi Tanaka, a captain in the Japanese army, who was accused of his own horrific acts. Tanaka's charges stemmed from his direct involvement in the massacre, during which he was responsible for the deaths of over 300 Chinese prisoners of war and civilians. The trial meticulously reviewed the evidence against the three men, tying them to the widespread atrocities committed during the Battle of Nanking and the horrific events that followed. The proceedings were marked by testimonies and documentary evidence that painted a clear picture of the scale and nature of the crimes. Naturally, given the circumstances in which the killings took place, evidence was lost, and many eyewitnesses died in the intervening years. All three were found guilty of committing grave offenses against humanity and were sentenced to the ultimate penalty, which was carried out swiftly. The sentences were carried out on January 28, 1948, in the Yuhuatai district, a location selected for the execution. The method chosen was shooting, a common practice for military executions. At the time of their execution, Mukai and Noda were both 35 years old, while Tanaka was slightly older, at 42. However, the veracity of this, quote, contest has been questioned, and it is now universally accepted that the contest did not happen, at least as indicated in the newspaper reports. While this killing contest is often portrayed now as being part of the Nanjing massacre, this contest took place en route to Nanjing. Further, according to the newspaper article, the two officers were engaging in this competition in the heat of battle, in hand-to-hand combat. After the war, Noda admitted that he only killed 4 or 5 individuals with a sword in hand-to-hand combat. Further, Noda admitted after the war, but before his trial, that he would convince opposing soldiers to surrender, and then when they were disarmed, behead them. At present, it's unlikely that the full scale of the men's actions will ever be known. But what's clear is that the story as commonly told is an exaggeration to make the men look like heroic soldiers, rather than serial slayers empowered by their government. Anyway, whatever the truth of the matter is, it's clear that these two men engaged in atrocities, and at the end of the day, faced justice for their actions. The Nekomata. The Nekomata is a feared cat yokai from Japanese folklore. The story may have its origins in a Chinese cat demon called the Senri. The Senri were noted to achieve great spiritual power in old age, and achieve the power to shapeshift into a beautiful man or woman. But back to the Japanese context, which has developed independently from this potential Chinese seed. Nekomata are domestic cats which have, quote, gone rogue by running away into the mountains in their old age, and gaining additional powers while there. Further, when they become Nekomata, they gain a second tail, which apparently enhances their magical abilities. Nekomata are generally considered to be cats who were treated terribly by their owners. One account from the 18th century in Yamato Kaiki tells of a haunted house owned by a samurai, plagued by unexplainable disturbances. The source of the trouble was revealed to be the family's aged cat, which had transformed into an extremely destructive Nekomata. This tale, like many others, highlights the Nekomata's association with malevolent activities and their ability to bring about chaos. Nekomata are often confused with their more benevolent yokai counterparts, the Bakaneko, but they possess unique traits. While Bakaneko are mischievous and capable of shape-shifting, Nekomata are known for more sinister powers, such as necromancy, the ability to control the dead. This distinction makes the Nekomata particularly feared. Their malevolence is further illustrated by their ability to summon fires, a trait that has cemented their reputation as dangerous beings. Ancient folklore depicts these creatures as vengeful spirits, particularly targeting those who have wronged them. The older and more mistreated a cat is before its transformation, the more potent its powers as a Nekomata become. This has led to various superstitions, including the severing of cats' tails to prevent their transformation into these dreaded yokai. Cultural depictions of Nekomata vary, with Edo period illustrations often showing them in human forms, particularly as older women. These Nekomata are often playing the shamisen, a detail that carries an ironic twist considering that shamisen were traditionally made from cat skins. In modern times, the allure of Nekomata continues, transitioning from feared mythical beings to captivating characters in manga, anime, and other forms of pop culture. The takeaway from this one: treat your cats well, or they'll come back and burn down your house and reanimate your corpses to do evil acts. The Champawat Tiger. The Champawat tiger, a notorious female Bengal tiger, is a chilling example of wildlife turning against humans, resulting in over 400 fatalities in early 20th century Nepal and India. This tiger began its spree by killing approximately 200 people in Nepal before being driven across the border into India, where it continued its rampage, adding another 234 victims to its toll. Colonel Jim Corbett, an Indian-born British hunter and colonial administrator, was called upon to stop this menace. Corbett was renowned in his day for his expertise in tracking and eliminating man-eating tigers. His quest led him to the Champawat region in 1907, where he eventually located and eliminated the tiger. It was believed that this particular tiger had resorted to hunting humans due to a combination of injuries and inability to hunt traditional prey. This aligned with Corbett's theory that stress of circumstances often leads tigers to become man-eaters. After this event, Jim Corbett became an advocate for conservation, significantly altering his views on wildlife and helping to establish India's first national park, now known as Jim Corbett National Park. Doppelgangers. The concept of doppelgangers, or spirit doubles, has intrigued cultures around the world for millennia. Stemming from the German term meaning double walker, a doppelganger is often perceived as an apparition or duplicate of a living person. The doppelganger is traditionally regarded as a harbinger of some misfortune or even an omen of one's impending demise. This doppelganger lore has existed since the earliest recorded ancient Egyptian myth. The ancient Egyptians believed in a Ka, a tangible spirit possessing the same memories and feelings as its living counterpart. There is some evidence that ancient Egyptians believed that this spirit could exit the body and act independently on occasion. Similarly, Norse mythology introduces the Vardiger, a ghostly double seen performing a person's actions in advance. However, unlike the doppelganger, this is not necessarily seen as a malevolent creature or spirit. Historical figures like John Donne, Percy Shelley, and King Umberto of Italy reportedly encountered their own doubles under circumstances that were later linked to personal tragedies. However, upon research into these circumstances, there is a clear blending of the lines between legend and reality. For example, take into account the story of King Umberto's supposed encounter with his doppelganger. This tale has Umberto dining in a restaurant only to find out that the proprietor was his exact look-alike. Their conversation revealed astonishing similarities. Both were natives of the same town, shared the same birthday, and there had wives with identical names. Further, the restaurant had commenced business on the day Umberto was crowned. According to the story, Umberto learned of the restaurant owner's demise in a shooting on July 29, 1900. Guess what day Umberto was assassinated? July 29, 1900. If this tale was true, I suspect it would be extremely well documented. But it isn't well documented at all, and as such, I strongly suspect it didn't happen. Possible paranormal explanations for the doppelganger have been suggested, with the two most common being a malevolent spirit or a shape-shifting being. Non-paranormal explanations indicate that some doppelganger sightings may be induced by psychological breakdowns or other more mundane explanations. Further, modern science has found the concept of twin strangers to be real, likely explaining many historical doppelganger accounts. Twin strangers are entirely unrelated people who look functionally identical. Human faces are vastly diverse due to evolutionary factors, with a specialized region in our brains dedicated to recognizing these differences. This diversity is not just a product of genetic variation, but also an evolutionary necessity for social interaction and identification. This same diversity, underpinned by a vast array of genetic combinations, makes the exact duplication of facial features between unrelated individuals highly improbable. However, our cognition isn't perfect, and people who appear close enough can appear to our brains to be perfect doppelgangers. Given all the potential explanations for doppelgangers, the phenomenon can definitely be classified as something real. Further, if you hold a cultural belief that seeing a doppelganger is a sign of misfortune, an innocuous twin strange event may lead to negative consequences. Lassiter's Reef, the lost outback mother lode. Lassiter's Reef is a legendary gold mine from Australia. In 1929, Lassiter captivated the Australian public and media by asserting that he had found a vast gold deposit years earlier. The story drew significant attention, leading to several expeditions attempting to rediscover the fabled site. In 1930, an expedition was undertaken which would greatly enhance the reputation of the reef, but also end tragically for Lassiter. In 1930, Lassiter managed to secure around £50,000 in private funding for an expedition to rediscover the reef. This journey was notable for its use of motor vehicles and an airplane, a rarity for the era. The team consisted of seasoned bushmen, prospectors, engineers, geologists, and a pilot. By 1930s standards, this was an absolute cutting-edge operation, as one would expect with the amount of funding they received. The expedition embarked from Alice Springs on July 21, 1930, with Lassiter proving to be an unreliable guide. Their destination was Ilbilba, a recently established airport near Lake Mackay. The journey was fraught with logistical and physical challenges, notably the loss of their airplane early in the trip. Upon arrival at Mount Leisler, located deep in the outback within the Northern Territory, Lassiter suddenly claimed they were 240 kilometers off target. Frustrated, the other members of the expedition accused Lassiter of fraud and terminated the expedition, leaving him to pursue his quest with just one other man, Paul Johns, and a team of camels. After a contentious period marked by erratic behavior, Lassiter claimed to have found the gold reef again, yet refused to disclose its location, leading to a fallout with Johns. Eventually, Johns also abandoned Lassiter, who then continued to wander into the desert alone with his camels, on his quixotic quest. In March 1931, the Eclipse Gold expedition found Lassiter's body, which had been buried in a shallow grave by the local Aboriginal people. According to Lassiter's diary, his camels had even recognized he was crazy and abandoned him. However, he was lucky and subsequently survived for a period with the assistance of a nomadic Aboriginal people before succumbing to malnutrition and exhaustion. This Aboriginal group attempted to help him, but according to the diary, it was too late, and Lassiter was already blind, amongst other ailments. In the years following this expedition, Lassiter was generally regarded as being incorrect about his finding, even if interest in the mine continued. However, geological evaluations conducted in 2014 suggested the region might have potential for gold, thus reigniting interest in Lassiter's elusive gold reef. Modern adventurers and gold prospectors continue to be drawn to the mystery, conducting their own quests based on Lassiter's descriptions and modern technological aids like Google Earth. Headless Men. The myth of the Headless Men is deeply rooted in both Greek mythology and medieval belief. These beings, described as having their facial features on their chests instead of their heads, have intrigued people for millennia. Greek historian Herodotus, one of the earliest sources, described these creatures inhabiting remote parts of the world, particularly in Libya and Africa. Pliny the Elder, a Roman naturalist and philosopher, echoed these accounts, adding to the air of mystery and remoteness by locating them in the inaccessible regions of Ethiopia. Interestingly, these creatures also found their way into Christian sermons and medieval thought. This reflected the period's attempts to reconcile classical mythology with Christian doctrine. The mention of these creatures in a sermon, for instance, underscores the period's acceptance of such beings while wrestling with their theological implications. And I'm not joking here, there were 3 schools of thought on the headless men. The first is that they should be preached to and converted to Christianity. After all, was a head required for salvation? The second school of thought was more sinister, suggesting that the creatures were agents of Satan who must be exterminated. The final school of thought is that they were actually just animals that happened to resemble men who were headless, and as such they should just be left alone as a general rule. The fascination with headless men persisted into the Renaissance and beyond. Further, as the scope of European knowledge of the world expanded, the headless men were pushed to further and new corners of the world. No longer were they thought to reside in Libya, but rather they were thought to live in the far-flung reaches of Asia and the Americas. Sir John Mandeville's travels and Sir Walter Raleigh's reports of encountering similar creatures in South America introduced the headless men to new generations. The most common explanation for what the headless men were comes from the potential mistaken belief in ritualistic or warrior masks used by other cultures. Under this theory, the mask, used in a ceremonial context, would make it appear that the person had no head, and instead had facial features on their stomach. Still others question whether the headless men represented people attempting to describe alien beings in a language which made sense to them in their context. The Mogollon Monster. The Mogollon Monster, Arizona's answer to Bigfoot, is a hominid-type cryptid. Described as over 7 feet tall, with red eyes and a body covered in dark hair. The Mogollon Monster is known for its foul odor, inhuman strides, and eerie screams. Like Bigfoot, it exhibits distinct behaviors like mimicking animal sounds, hurling stones, and decapitating prey. While some suggest it could be a distinct species adapted to Arizona's climate, skeptics argue sightings could be misidentified bears, a known local species. Despite similarities with Bigfoot, the Mogollon Monster's unique traits and habitat fuel debates on its existence and classification. In my view, I agree with the bear misidentification hypothesis. But who am I kidding? I would love the Mogollon Monster to be real. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Check out the Patreon, my YouTube membership, and the Discord. Links are in the description. Shout out to my patrons Noah Schubert, Kazakh Cutie, Kurt the Squirt, Monoxide Wendigo, and Jeffer Metcalf. Also, big shout out to YouTube member Jordan All. Until next time, stay safe and healthy, and peace out. Welcome to part 18 of the Ultimate Unsolved Mysteries Iceberg. In this series, we deep dive cases including true crime, mysterious disappearances, myths and legends, strange events, internet mysteries, and more. The disappearance of Sean Flynn. The disappearance of photojournalist Sean Flynn in 1970 remains one of the most enduring mysteries of the Vietnam War era. Flynn was the only son of legendary Hollywood actor Errol Flynn and French-American actress Lily Demita. He diverged from his initial path in acting to pursue photojournalism, a field in which he found his true calling. Raised primarily by his mother after his parents' separation, Sean Flynn was reportedly deeply influenced by her adventurous spirit. Flynn's transition from Hollywood to the war zones started in the early 1960s. Despite a brief stint at Duke University and some early success in acting, he was drawn to the front lines of conflict zones. first visiting Israel to cover the Arab-Israeli conflict of 1967 before a trip to Vietnam. His coverage of the Vietnam War, where he worked alongside other high-risk photojournalists, showcased the harsh realities of war through his lens. Flynn's fearless approach led him to Cambodia in early 1970, a time when North Vietnamese advances into the country made it a focal point of the war. On April 6, 1970, Flynn and fellow photojournalist Dana Stone set off from Phnom Penh to Saigon, choosing motorcycles over the safety of limousines used by other journalists. Their destination was a government-sponsored press conference in Saigon, but they never arrived. They were last seen approaching a Viet Cong checkpoint on Highway 1, an action that led to their disappearance. Witnesses reported seeing them stripped of their motorcycles and led away into the tree line by unidentified individuals, believed to be Viet Cong guerrillas. The aftermath of their disappearance saw extensive search efforts, notably by Flynn's mother. Despite these efforts, Flynn and Stone were never seen again, and their fate remains a subject of speculation within the journalism and military communities. It is believed that they were held by Viet Cong and North Vietnamese forces before being turned over to the Khmer Rouge. In 1984, Flynn was declared legally dead by his mother, who continued searching for him until her own death in 1994. The slaying of Soo-ya Kim. The case of Soo-ya Kim, a South Korean immigrant living in New York, remains unsolved since her tragic end in 1991. Soo-ya Kim and her husband, Soo-young Kim, moved to the United States in 1981, striving for a better life. They worked hard and eventually owned 2 stores in Long Island and Bushwick, Brooklyn. Their life seemed to be a story of success and perseverance until Soo-ya's life was abruptly ended. On June 29, 1991, Soo-ya Kim went missing. She had left her 2 sons at their grandmother's house and was supposed to go shopping. Her disappearance led to a frantic search. About 10 hours later, her lifeless body was found by a private security guard, Joe Jones, in a dumpster in Bedford-Stuyvesant. The autopsy revealed that she had been stabbed 9 times, though there were no signs of illicit assault, making collection of definitive DNA evidence more difficult. The primary witness in this case was Joe Jones, the security guard who discovered Soo-ya's body. Earlier that day, he had encountered a suspicious individual near the dumpster, offering him $20 to overlook his dumping trash there. Joe noticed blood on the man's shirt and on the ground, which the man claimed was the result of a fistfight he had been in that day. The suspect, as described by Jones, was a white man in his 20s, wearing round glasses, a white tank top with a blue stripe, and blue sweatpants. Despite this detailed description, the identity of the man remains unknown. A part of a license plate seen by Jones led to a blue Nissan registered to a Taiwanese exchange student, who was later cleared of any involvement. With no substantial leads from the car, the investigation faced a dead end. Various theories have been proposed over the years regarding the identity and motive of the assailant. Some speculate that the killer might have known Soo-ya, considering the brutal nature of the attack. Others suggest that the killer might have been a delivery man or taxi driver, familiar with the area where the body was found. Yet no concrete evidence has emerged to support these theories. Another theory suggests that she may have been a victim of Joel Rifkin, a prolific serial killer active in New York City at the time. In favor of this theory, the description given by Joe Jones, the security guard, as well as the composite sketch made from that description look vaguely familiar. However, despite a very similar description, Joel Rifkin primarily or exclusively targeted paid companionship workers, and thus Soo-ya Kim does not fit his victim profile. The impact of Soo-ya Kim's tragic end led her husband to move back to South Korea with their sons in 1993, unable to bear the painful memories and unanswered questions. Unfortunately, it appears that this case is entirely dormant at this point, and given that Suya Kim's family returned to South Korea, there is no one local to advocate on her behalf. The disappearance of Lucy Schumann. Lucy Schumann, a 48-year-old woman from Louisville, Kentucky, vanished under mysterious circumstances during a vacation in St. John, Virgin Islands. Schumann was last seen on September 15, 2019. She was officially reported missing 4 days later, on September 19th, when she failed to return to her Airbnb accommodation in the Coral Bay area. Despite leaving her luggage behind, there was no sign of her whereabouts. Schumann's rental vehicle, a yellow Jeep Wrangler with the license plate JAR 693, was later discovered abandoned in the parking lot of the Salt Pond area within the Virgin Islands National Park. This discovery led to an immediate search in the surrounding area. Subsequently, a backpack containing Schumann's identification was found near the edge of a cliff atop Ram Hill Trail, a remote section of the park. The location of the backpack near a cliff prompted a thorough search of the area, including the ground below the cliff. However, authorities have indicated they do not believe she fell, as the terrain consists of jagged rocks, where any fall would likely have resulted in the discovery of a body. The search for Schumann was extensive, involving both water and ground searches by the National Park Service, St. John Rescue, and the Virgin Islands Police Department. Efforts were intensified with additional ground searches and divers exploring the waters in the Ram Head area, despite the impending approach of Tropical Storm Karen, which threatened to hinder operations. The case remains unsolved, with no conclusive evidence indicating what happened to Schumann after her disappearance. Schumann's case is another case that has sadly received minimal attention, and one of those sorts of cases I feel that it is important to highlight. Jimmy here, the YouTuber behind the Lazy Chill Zone channel, asking a quick favor. If you're enjoying my content, please hit the like and subscribe buttons and the notification bell. My goal is to create the most expansive Iceberg series in YouTube history, and I want you all along for the ride. Also, consider signing up for a YouTube membership, joining the Patreon, and joining the Discord. One more thing, check out the merch store and pick something cool up while also supporting the channel. Jacqueline Nguyen. The disappearance of Jacqueline Nguyen is yet another underreported on missing persons case. Jacqueline was last heard from on October 13, 2019 or March 17, 2020. More on this issue in a moment. Born on February 13, 1994 and of Vietnamese descent, she was 25 or 26 years old at the time of her disappearance. On the day she vanished, Jacqueline informed her family that she was on her way to the Dalles Medical Center in the Dalles, Oregon. Or was she? The peculiar aspect of her case lies in the ambiguity surrounding the details of her disappearance. Some discrepancies exist regarding the date and location of her last known whereabouts, with some agencies noting a disappearance date as March 17, 2020, in San Jose, California. Given that the San Jose Police Department is investigating her disappearance, I'm inclined to believe that the San Jose location and date are correct. Unfortunately, very few details are available with respect to Jacqueline's disappearance, given the two separate dates when she may have gone missing, as well as the fact that for her first missing date she was on the way to the hospital. Combined with her age, I suspect that she may have suffered from a mental health crisis. Further, I suspect that she was subsequently released once the acute phase of her mental health crisis ended, with her then traveling to San Jose where she went missing again. Of course, this is all speculation, but unfortunately, it doesn't appear that any media outlets conducted any investigations into her case, and investigators are tight-lipped. Seriously, if you live in the area, perhaps ask your local media why no one has bothered producing a story on the basis of this missing woman. I struggle with how many of these recent missing persons cases don't even have a single newspaper article associated with them. If you have any information with respect to this case, please contact the San Jose Police Department to report the details. The Betty and Barney Hill abduction. This case comes from a recommendation by subscriber Syntax Nexus, with a request for more cases related to aliens in this series. The Betty and Barney Hill incident stands as a seminal event in UFO history, marking one of the earliest and most publicized reports of an alien abduction. Seriously, I can't overstate the importance of this abduction. Basically, every aspect you think of when you think of alien abductions goes back to this case. On the evening of September 19, 1961, while driving through the White Mountains of New Hampshire, the couple encountered a mysterious craft. They observed it closely, noting its pancake-like shape and the silent, hovering manner in which it moved. Barney, armed with binoculars, witnessed beings within the craft, describing them as somehow not human and dressed in black, shiny uniforms. The beings communicated telepathically with Barney, instructing him to stay still. This encounter led to a series of puzzling physical effects and missing time for the Hills. Upon arriving home, the couple noticed inexplicable changes. Their watches had stopped, the leather strap of the binoculars was torn, and Barney's shoes were scuffed. Additionally, Betty's dress was damaged and stained with a mysterious pink powder, which, when tested in later years, yielded inconclusive results. They also observed shiny, concentric circles on their car's trunk, which seemed to affect a compass's behavior in an unusual manner. Plagued by unsettling dreams and a lack of memory about the event, the Hills sought the help of Benjamin Simon, a psychiatrist, who used hypnosis to recover their memories. Under hypnosis, they recounted an extraordinary experience of being stopped by the UFO and then taken aboard the craft. There, they were separated and subjected to medical examinations by the non-human beings. Their accounts included descriptions of being inspected, having samples taken from their bodies, and being communicated with telepathically. Notably, Betty recalled a star map shown to her by one of the beings, which would later become a point of significant intrigue and analysis among UFO researchers. The public disclosure of their experience in 1965 catapulted the Hills to fame, setting the template for future alien abduction reports. The narrative elements of their story, missing time, medical examinations, and telepathic communication would become staples in the alien abduction lore that followed. Despite skepticism and alternative explanations, such as suggestions of sleep deprivation or psychological distress, their story remains a cornerstone of UFO folklore. It's really hard to overstate their influence on how subsequent alien encounters were perceived and reported. The Hills account did more than just popularize the concept of alien abduction, it also intersected with social issues of the time. Notably, as they were an interracial couple during a period of significant racial tension in the United States. This lent credibility to their story, as individuals on the outside speculated that given their relationship, they would not wish to attract any unwanted attention. Numerous theories have been proposed to explain the incident. Hill boosters cite the credibility of the couple in support of their position that the Hills had a legitimate close encounter with alien life forms. Further, they also cite the similarity of subsequent abductions as proof that the Hills were telling the truth. Notably, detractors also cite the same thing as evidence of a mass hysteria-like event surrounding aliens. Another theory suggests the power of suggestion, particularly in the context of hypnosis, which was used to recover the Hills' memories. Critics argue that hypnosis is not a reliable method for retrieving true memories, as it can create false or distorted ones. This could explain the vivid details of their abduction story. which emerged primarily after their sessions with Dr. Benjamin Simon, the psychiatrist. I note that memories recovered through hypnosis also played a very large role in the Satanic Panic, a cultural phenomenon routinely discussed throughout this series. Furthermore, cultural and media influences may have shaped their perceptions and memories. Prior to their claimed abduction, stories of UFOs and extraterrestrial beings were becoming an increasingly popular part of popular culture, potentially influencing the Hills narrative. Critics have noted that an episode of The Outer Limits, broadcast in the weeks prior to the hypnosis event, mirrors many of the aspects of the abduction. Further, the fact that Betty's sister had claimed to see a UFO before might also have predisposed Betty towards a belief in UFOs. I find it very difficult to say anything definitive about this case beyond one thing. I don't believe that Betty and Barney Hill were lying or exaggerating their case. Also, quick aside, Barney Hill's granddaughter is active UFC fighter Angela Hill. Just a neat fact, nothing more. Let me know in the comments what other UFO sightings or abductions you would like me to cover. Mussolini's Sword of Islam. In 1911, Italy conquered Libya from the Ottoman Empire, but administered its new territories as two separate colonies. In 1934, the two colonies, known as Italian Cyrenaica and Italian Tripolitania, were merged into the newfound colony of Italian Libya. In 1934, after Italy created the colony of Italian Libya, leader Benito Mussolini initiated a strategy to form bonds with the Muslim community there. He called the locals Italian Muslims of the Fourth Shore of Italy and promoted Islamic infrastructure by constructing mosques and schools for Quranic studies. He also facilitated services for those making pilgrimages to Mecca and established a high school of Islamic culture in Tripoli. However, this seemingly benevolent effort concealed a deeper motive. Both the fascist regime in Italy and certain Islamic factions saw this as a way to unite against their mutual adversaries, primarily France and the United Kingdom. This alliance stemmed from their shared dissatisfaction with the outcomes of the 1919 Treaty of Versailles, which they felt did not meet the demands of either Italy or the Islamic community in North Africa. To gain Arab support and cement this alliance, Mussolini, despite his agreement with the Catholic Church through the Lateran Treaty, proclaimed himself the protector of Islam. He argued that by taking over Libya, previously under Ottoman rule, he was the rightful successor to the Islamic Caliphate. On March 20th, 1937, in a ceremonial event outside Tripoli, Mussolini was presented with the Sword of Islam by Yusuf Karisk, a Berber leader who supported the Italian rule in Libya, marking his acceptance and support from powerful local factions. Mussolini then entered Tripoli with great fanfare, declaring his commitment to peace, justice, and respect for Islamic laws. Despite official regime media approval, this event was ridiculed by many Italians due to its perceived extravagant and contradictory nature. The following year, an equine statue was unveiled in Tripoli to honor Mussolini, proclaiming him as a peacemaker and savior of Libya. In this statue, Mussolini was wielding the Sword of Islam as a symbol of friendship with the Libyan population. The sword itself, a fine piece of craftsmanship from Florence, with a double-edged blade and decorated with gold, symbolized Mussolini's power and connection to Islam. After its presentation in 1937, it was kept in Mussolini's summer home, but disappeared after the home was looted by Italian resistance fighters in 1943. Theories about the current location of Mussolini's Sword of Islam are speculative, as its whereabouts have remained unknown since 1943. No verified information has surfaced regarding its location since that time. There are a few conjectures among historians and enthusiasts. Some believe the sword could have been hidden or buried by those who looted Mussolini's home, possibly to prevent it from being recovered by fascist sympathizers. Others speculate the opposite, that fascists hid or buried the sword to prevent it from becoming a symbol to Italian anti-fascists. Others speculate that the sword may have been secretly taken out of Italy, perhaps by Allied soldiers or local resistance members who might have recognized its historical and symbolic value. Another theory suggests that the sword could still be in Italy, hidden away in a private collection or forgotten in an attic or storage room, its significance unrecognized by its current holder. However, these are all speculations, and without concrete evidence, the true fate of the Sword of Islam remains one of the many unsolved mysteries from the era of World War II. Let me know in the comments if you would be interested in an Iceberg series on unsolved mysteries from the Second World War. The Bakaneko. The Bakaneko, a fascinating and feared creature in Japanese folklore, is more than just a simple tale. It is a complex blend of history, superstition, and cultural practices. Originating from a time when cats were both revered and mistrusted, the Bakaneko is portrayed as a supernatural entity with a variety of unsettling abilities. At its core, the Bakaneko is believed to be a transformed creature, evolving from an ordinary domestic cat into something much more sinister. That said, the Bakaneko is not nearly as sinister as the Nekomata, discussed in the last part of this series. This transformation, according to lore, could occur under specific conditions. The cat needed to be of a certain age, weight, and often possess a peculiarly long tail. This led to a unique cultural response during the Edo period, particularly due to the cat's role in protecting all forms of farms, but in particular, silkworm farms from rodents. Cats became invaluable, yet their potential transformation into Bakaneko cast a shadow of fear. The legend of the Bakaneko evolved into various narratives and practices throughout Japan. For example, in Saga, a tale recounts a Bakaneko wreaking havoc in a daimyo's castle, highlighting the creature's ability to curse and impersonate humans. A renowned story of the Bakaneko involves Takasu Genbei, a samurai, who noticed a drastic shift in his mother's demeanor following the mysterious disappearance of their family cat years prior. She became reclusive, distancing herself from relatives and acquaintances, and isolating herself during meals in her chamber. On spying into her quarters, the family was horrified to observe a feline creature, decked out in the mother's attire, voraciously consuming animal remains. Despite his doubts, and against all basic common sense, Takasu eliminated the entity resembling his mother. By the next day, the body reverted to that of the long-lost family cat. In a shocking discovery, Takasu uncovered his actual mother's skeleton beneath the floorboards of her room, her bones having been gnawed on by a cat. I've said it once before, and I'll say it again, but treat your family cat well. If you don't, they could come back and slay your mom and live in her house Little Red Riding Hood style. In Edo-era folklore, Bakaneko were said to disguise themselves as humans, particularly women, to engage in deceptive and malevolent activities. This led to the creation of urban legends such as the Bakaneko paid companionship workers. Yes, you heard that right. Bakaneko would transform themselves into ladies of the night and have relations with human men. The Bakaneko, like other cat yokai such as the Nekomata, continue to be extremely influential in Japanese culture. I speculate the reason for this level of influence is because cats remain popular pets in Japan, and anyone who has been around them knows they're up to something. The Yeti. The Yeti, often known as the Abominable Snowman, is a cryptid rumored to inhabit the Himalayas. This Bigfoot cousin has sparked both fear and fascination, leading to numerous expeditions and studies aiming to prove its existence. Despite the plethora of anecdotal evidence, including visual sightings, photographs, and even casts of large footprints, conclusive proof of the Yeti remains elusive. The origins of the Yeti legend can be traced back to Sherpa folklore, with the creature often compared to Bigfoot due to their similar descriptions as large, bipedal apes covered in hair. The term Yeti itself comes from the Tibetan words for rocky and bear, reflecting the creature's reputed habitat and appearance. That said, Tibetans do not recognize the creature as a bear, but rather this name reflects the creature's bear-like appearance. Tibetan lore even categorizes Yetis by size and color, from the giant black-furred Nyalmo, which stands a staggering 15 feet tall, to the adorable Rang Shim Bombo at just 3 feet tall. The Western world's fascination with the Yeti began in earnest in the early to mid-20th century. However, the earliest accounts reached the West prior to this, quote, Yeti mania. Perhaps the earliest known Western Yeti encounter was documented by B.H. Hodgson in 1832, who described a tall bipedal creature covered in dark hair native to Nepal. Despite this sighting happening in Nepal, Hodgson concluded that this was a regional variant of the orangutan, which given orangutan knowledge at the time was not entirely unreasonable. A significant increase in interest in the Yeti came when the creature was dubbed the Abominable Snowman during a 1921 Mount Everest expedition led by Charles Howard Berry. The mid-20th century saw a peak in Yeti sightings, coinciding with numerous expeditions to Mount Everest. Perhaps the most notable evidence from this era came from Eric Shipton in 1951, who photographed what he believed to be Yeti footprints at 20,000 feet. This era also saw contributions from legendary figures like Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay, who reported seeing large footprints. In 1960, Sir Edmund Hillary, now one of the most famous and influential people in the world due to his conquest of Everest, embarked on another expedition to prove or disprove the Yeti. The Silver Hut expedition in 1960 was conducted with the expressed purpose of trying to either prove or disprove the existence of the Yeti. Despite high hopes and widespread curiosity, Hillary's quest yielded no concrete evidence to support the myth of the Yeti, and all evidence found was unhelpful to the Yeti's cause. The expedition also involved examining supposed Yeti tracks and investigating relics revered by locals, such as Yeti scalps kept in remote temples. These investigations were thorough, with Hillary bringing back 3 such relics for scientific examination. Upon analysis, 2 of these relics were identified as originating from bears and 1 from a goat, debunking the theory that they belonged to the elusive Yeti. Hillary's findings were significant in demystifying the Yeti legend. He concluded that the Yeti was not the strange, superhuman creature it was imagined to be. His rational approach to the investigation found logical explanations for most Yeti phenomena, attributing them to known wildlife in the region, such as Tibetan blue bears, red pandas, or goats. Reflecting on the results of his expedition, Hillary remarked that another hunt for the Yeti would be, quote, a sheer waste of money. After this expedition and subsequent testing of Yeti relics, scientific interest in the Yeti dwindled, and at this point the creature attracts virtually no mainstream scientific interest. Given the significant local belief in the Yeti, as well as the significant sightings by explorers of the Yeti, I'm not comfortable simply dismissing the Yeti as fictional. In a sense, the Yeti is real, but in my view, it isn't an ape, but rather a series of bear misidentifications. Tibetan bears are the likely cause of Yeti sightings, specifically the Tibetan brown bear and the Himalayan brown bear. Further, the Tibetan brown bear and the Himalayan brown bear have a wide variety of coats, which cover all reported colors associated with the Yeti. When observed standing on their hind legs, these bears can closely resemble the bipedal figure of the Yeti, as described in eyewitness accounts. Tibetan bears are among the largest bear species in Asia, with their significant size and stature contributing to the confusion. In instances where these bears are seen from a distance, or in less than ideal visibility conditions, such as fog or snow, their silhouettes can easily be mistaken for that of a human-like creature. Additionally, the bear's occasional bipedal posture, adopted for various reasons including feeding or surveying their surroundings, further fuels the misconception. Further yet, bears have sometimes been observed to walk bipedally for long periods of time, just because they can. Further, scientific analyses of purported Yeti samples, such as hair and footprints, have often led back to these bears. Make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Also, check out the Patreon and the YouTube membership. Your support allows me to take on more difficult topics that risk demonetization. Remember to hit the playlist to see dozens of hours of Unsolved Mysteries content. Huge thanks to all my YouTube members and patrons. Shout out to my patrons Noah Schubert, Kazakh Cutie, Kurt the Squirt, Monoxide Wendigo, and Jeffer Metcalf. Also, big shout out to YouTube member Jordan All. Until next time, stay safe and healthy. Peace out, everyone. Welcome to part 19 of the Ultimate Unsolved Mysteries Iceberg. In this series, we deep dive cases including true crime, mysterious disappearances, myths and legends, strange events, internet mysteries, and more. Ireland's Vanishing Triangle. Between the late 80s and the late 90s, a disturbing series of disappearances occurred in an area dubbed Ireland's Vanishing Triangle, an 80-mile stretch outside Dublin. This term, coined by the Irish media, reflects the unexplained nature of the vanishings of a number of young women during this time, as well as 3 confirmed slayings. Upwards of 10 women disappeared as part of the Vanishing Triangle case. Importantly, none of the women fit the usual profile of women on the fringes of society targeted by predators. Annie McCarrick, a 26-year-old American, disappeared on March 26, 1993, after catching a bus from Dublin to Enniskerry. Her vanishing drawn significant media attention due to her being American. Jojo Dullard, a 21-year-old woman, vanished while hitchhiking home on November 9, 1995. Fiona Sinnott, a 19-year-old mother, vanished on February 8, 1998, after leaving a pub in Broadway, County Wexford. Further, 3 women were confirmed to be slain: Angie Smith, Patricia Doherty, and Marie Kilmartin. Angie Smith, a 27-year-old mother of 2, went missing in the early hours of July 12, 1987, after attending a David Bowie concert. She was last seen walking towards O'Connell Street Bridge in Dublin after leaving a nightclub with acquaintances. Her estranged husband reported her disappearance, and her remains were discovered in the Glendew Mountains on April 3, 1988. Forensic evidence indicated she had been strangled and her body concealed with a plastic bag. Patricia Doherty, a 29-year-old prison guard, disappeared on December 23, 1991, after leaving her home to buy Santa hats. Her husband reported her missing on Christmas Day. Witnesses saw her walking towards a shopping center and possibly entering a red car. Her remains were found in the Wicklow Mountains on June 21, 1992, and it is believed she was strangled based on the condition of her remains. Marie Kilmartin, a 35-year-old woman, vanished on December 16, 1993, after being dropped off at her home from work. Her groceries were found unpacked and a mysterious phone call was traced to a nearby payphone. Her body was discovered in a bog near Mount Mellick, County Lewis, on June 10, 1994. A forensic examination concluded that she had been strangled. Despite the lack of conclusive evidence, theories and suspicions have circulated, including the potential involvement of known criminals. However, no persons of interest have been named in the case. Despite a task force being set up to investigate the vanishings, the authorities were unable to determine well, anything about this case, at least publicly. Anyway, I had never heard of these cases prior to research for this episode, and I would like to come back and further discuss the cases of some of the individual women. Tara Ray. This case is a recommendation from subscriber Rabbitfish. Remember, if you have a recommendation and want it included in this series, leave a comment below or in the LCZ Discord. Tara Ray, a French showman born around 1772, is remembered for his inconceivable appetite and bizarre eating habits. Despite being of average size, his capacity to consume was beyond ordinary, leading to his expulsion from home due to his family's inability to sustain his dietary demands. This insatiable hunger pushed him to join a band of circus outcasts, captivating audiences with his ability to ingest objects like stones and live animals. His condition escalated when he joined the French Revolutionary Army. The military rations fell short of satisfying his hunger, leading to his hospitalization due to extreme exhaustion. There, despite being granted quadruple rations, his hunger persisted. He would consume inedible items and was involved in disturbing acts, such as consuming live animals and engaging in scavenging from refuse containers. Tara Ray's unusual capabilities caught the attention of military surgeons Dr. Percy and Dr. Corville. They conducted experiments, one of which involved him eating a meal meant for 15 people, which he did effortlessly before falling into a deep sleep. His unique condition led to an unexpected role during the War of the First Coalition. He became a military courier, using his stomach to transport documents. Despite this, his first espionage mission failed when he was caught by Prussian forces. Back in the hospital, Tara Ray's uncontrollable appetite led to what may have been a horrific and tragic incident. His time at a military hospital ended dramatically when suspicions arose regarding his involvement in the disappearance of a 14-month-old child. And yes, the theory was that he consumed the child due to his extreme hunger. Although direct evidence was lacking, the incident resulted in his expulsion from the hospital. But wait, there's more. While in the hospital, he attempted to consume the blood of the other patients who were undergoing bloodletting. Also, and how do I phrase this delicately for YouTube, the average person doesn't confuse the hospital morgue with the hospital cafeteria. This was not the case for this guy. The morgue was basically an all-you-can-eat buffet. In his final years, Tara Ray's health declined. He returned to the hospital, plagued by tuberculosis and explosive diarrhea, a condition that finally subdued his lifelong battle with hunger. He died in 1798, leaving a legacy filled with as many questions as there were meals consumed. His autopsy revealed abnormalities such as an unusually wide gullet and a massive, engorged stomach. But the exact cause of his insatiable appetite remains undiagnosed. Modern medical theories speculated to be a severe form of hyperthyroidism or an endocrine disorder. Okay, so I'm going to ask everyone to indulge my quote, unique theory on this mystery. Maybe Tara Ray was a hungry ghost. The theory that Tara Ray could have been a preta, or hungry ghost, from Buddhist mythology, offers a spiritual explanation for his insatiable hunger. In this belief system, pretas are entities afflicted with perpetual hunger or thirst, often as karmic retribution for past lives. This perspective sees Tara Ray's endless appetite and unusual eating habits not merely as medical anomalies, but as manifestations of a deeper spiritual condition. Importantly, the description of Tara Ray as a skinny man with a distended stomach also matches most descriptions of the Preta. Anyway, do I think Tara Ray was actually a Buddhist spiritual entity? Probably not. But what's the fun of an Unsolved Mysteries series without proposing some wild theories myself? And stay tuned because later in this episode we'll be diving into the mythology of hungry ghosts. Ariel School UFO case. On September 16, 1994, an extraordinary event unfolded at Ariel School in Rua, Zimbabwe, captivating UFO enthusiasts and skeptics alike. This incident, widely known as the Ariel School phenomenon, involved 62 schoolchildren who claimed to witness a UFO and non-human entities during their morning break. The children, aged between 6 and 12, reported seeing a silvery disc-shaped object land near their school playground, and some described encountering beings with atypical features. The account began on a typical school day, with the teachers inside attending a meeting while the students were outside. According to the children's reports, they saw a craft land on a nearby hill and observed figures emerging from it. The event allegedly lasted up to 15 minutes. Initially met with skepticism from the faculty, the children's consistency and the detailed drawings they provided of the incident prompted further investigation. One of the most prominent figures to delve into the Ariel School case was Cynthia Hind, a well-known UFO researcher. After learning about the event, Hind visited the school and interviewed the children. She found their accounts credible, particularly considering their limited exposure to alien pop culture due to their rural backgrounds. Hind's investigations were later joined by Dr. John E. Mack, a professor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School, known for his research into alien abductions. The children reportedly shared with Mack that the beings communicated with them telepathically, delivering messages about the importance of environmental protection. The implications of the Ariel School encounter continue to stir debate. Skeptics argue the sighting could be attributed to the re-entry of a rocket seen in the area days before, or suggest it was a case of mass hysteria. Critics also point out inconsistencies in the children's accounts, the influence of media, and the possibility of story cross-contamination during group interviews. Despite the skepticism, many of the children, now adults, have maintained their accounts of the encounter. However, some of them are adamant that there was nothing witnessed. The story has been examined in various documentaries and remains a significant event in UFO history due to the number of young, seemingly credible witnesses. The Ariel School incident could be a case of mass hysteria, a psychological phenomenon where a group experiences a collective delusion. In this context, the school children, influenced by a heightened state of excitement and the power of suggestion, might have shared a contagious psychological reaction, leading to similar hallucinations or beliefs without a physical basis. Mass hysteria often occurs in tight-knit groups and can be triggered by environmental stresses or significant events. The fact that the children's accounts have discrepancies and were influenced by group interviews suggests the possibility of suggestibility and collective influence. Additionally, the presence of UFO and alien stories in the media prior to the incident may have primed their perceptions. This theory is supported by the absence of physical evidence and the fact that not all children present witnessed the phenomenon. The disappearance of Lakeisha Nicole Archie. This one comes from subscriber Mani the God. Lakeisha is their aunt and reached out to get some more coverage on her case. Thanks for trusting me with this task, Mani. Lakeisha Archie was a hard-working, single 22-year-old woman living in Sydney, Ohio. She vanished on a Saturday evening in 2002 after visiting her mother's apartment on Park Street to borrow movies. After that night, Lakeisha was never seen or heard from again. In a 2021 interview with Lakeisha's mother, Elizabeth recounted her last interaction with her daughter. Elizabeth recalled how normal the interaction was. Lakeisha was just borrowing some movies and advised her mom she would talk to her the next day. Lakeisha didn't call the next day, which had Elizabeth concerned as that wasn't like Lakeisha. However, Elizabeth's worry turned into panic when Lakeisha's employer contacted her and asked where she was, as she had been missing from work for a number of days. The Sydney police were notified and conducted a thorough investigation, However, nothing whatsoever turned up with respect to Lakeisha. There was never a body discovered, nor was there any evidence of foul play whatsoever. Lakeisha was just gone. Adding to the mystery, no one ever saw or heard from her again. Unlike other similar cases, there haven't even been any potential sightings. Sydney police investigated Lakeisha's boyfriend, and he was cleared of all suspicion in her disappearance. Thankfully, Lakeisha has family members like her mom and Monty the God to advocate on her behalf and keep her disappearance from being forgotten. If you have any information in relation to Lakeisha Archie's disappearance, please contact the Sydney, Ohio Police Department. Jimmy here, the YouTuber behind the Lazy Chill Zone channel. If you're enjoying my content, please hit the like and subscribe buttons and the notification bell. My goal is to create the most expansive Iceberg series in YouTube history, and I want you all along for the ride. Also, consider signing up for a YouTube membership, joining the Patreon, and joining the Discord, The Shannon Shepherdson Mystery. This is a very personal recommendation from subscriber Maria White. Unfortunately, there's not too much detail out there on this case. The unresolved case of Shannon Shepherdson, a 44-year-old woman found unconscious outside her ex-boyfriend's home in Spanish Valley, began on the morning of October 29, 2008. Discovered lying at the base of a few steps leading from the patio deck to the ground, Shannon's state immediately raised questions, particularly given the severity of her injuries. When her sister, Shauna Jones, was alerted and arrived at the hospital, she was confronted with a sight that was both shocking and heart-wrenching. Shannon, with a severely swollen and bruised face, and a leg broken in 2 places, was almost unrecognizable. The gravity and nature of the injuries seemed inconsistent with a mere fall from the steps, suggesting a darker undercurrent to the incident. In the days that followed, Shannon was hospitalized and remained in a coma. Despite the medical team's efforts, her condition showed no signs of improvement, leading her family to the agonizing decision to discontinue life support after 16 days. The autopsy findings later revealed that she died from multiple blunt force trauma to the head, further complicated by chronic alcoholism. Despite this peculiar autopsy finding, Shannon's death was ruled to be caused by chronic alcoholism. Her family has acknowledged that she did suffer from chronic alcoholism, but states that the multiple blunt force traumas to her head were not caused by her. While Shannon's boyfriend was named as a person of interest in the case, the lack of reporting on this case makes it difficult to tell what the results of this investigation were. However, no charges were ever brought against the boyfriend. The Western Australian Emergency of March 1944. In March 1944, during the final years of World War II, Western Australia faced a significant emergency, spurred by the detection of Japanese naval activities that suggested a potential threat to the region. This situation unfolded against the backdrop of the broader Pacific theater of the war, where Allied forces were on high alert for Japanese military movements. The Allied response in Western Australia was shaped by intelligence reports and strategic decisions made at the highest levels of military command, both locally and internationally. The genesis of the emergency can be traced back to Japanese naval redeployments. In February 1944, the Imperial Japanese Navy's main striking force, the Combined Fleet, moved its base slightly closer to Western Australia, alarming Allied commanders. This move was interpreted as a precursor to possible raids into the Indian Ocean and against Western Australian targets. In response, the Allies bolstered their naval and air forces in the region, reinforcing the British Eastern Fleet and increasing air unit numbers in strategic locations. The situation escalated when the USS Hado, a submarine stationed at Fremantle, detected unidentified Japanese ships, presumed to be large warships, near the Lombok Strait in Indonesia. This detection led to heightened concerns of an imminent attack on the Perth-Fremantle area, particularly as these movements coincided with a full moon. The Australian government, informed by the Chiefs of Staff Committee, began preparations to bolster local defenses in response to this perceived threat. Despite these preparations, the feared Japanese attack never materialized. It was later understood that the Japanese naval movements had other objectives, and Western Australia was never their target. However, the incident had already triggered a significant Allied military response. The region's defenses were fully manned, air patrols were increased, and naval units were redeployed to counter the anticipated Japanese force. Submarines and air squadrons were put on high alert, and strategic bases, including Fremantle's port, were prepared for potential combat scenarios. This caused substantial levels of fear and anxiety in the local populace, who believed that they were in imminent fear of Japanese invasion. However, in retrospect, by March 1944, Japan's navy was effectively on its last legs, with little ability remaining to project power, and likely not to Western Australia. That said, given the heightened sense of awareness, air raid sirens were set off multiple times in light of, quote, Japanese planes being seen. The event raises questions about the nature of the perceived threat and whether the response was proportionate or a result of mass hysteria. In the case of the Western Australian emergency, the fear of a Japanese attack, though based on military intelligence, may have been amplified by the existing wartime tensions. Further, it may also have been amplified by the reputation for brutality amongst the Japanese army. The Orang Pendek. The Orang Pendek, translating to short person in Indonesian, is a hominid cryptid purported to inhabit the remote forests of Sumatra, Indonesia. This creature has captured the imagination of everyone for over a century, with its existence being attested by indigenous tribes, Dutch colonists, and Western travelers alike. Standing between 2.5 and 4.5 feet tall, the creature is described as a bipedal primate covered in short fur. The Orang Pendek is said to roam the dense, mountainous rainforests that remain largely unexplored by modern science. This habitat, rich in biodiversity, presents an ideal environment for such an elusive creature to exist away from human encroachment. Eyewitness accounts describe the Orang Pendek as a bipedal ape, with a covering of short black or gray fur, and an appearance similar to the orangutans native to Sumatra. It is allegedly predominantly a herbivore, with a diet consisting of fruits. However, according to some reports, they also enjoy freshwater mollusks and fish and terrestrial meat. Despite its formidable strength, the Orang Pendek is not considered aggressive towards humans, instead choosing to avoid contact. The first Western acknowledgement of the Orang Pendek dates back to the early 20th century. Notable sightings by Dutch colonists and subsequent reports detailing close encounters told of this mysterious creature. These accounts often describe the Orang Pendek with more human-like characteristics, differentiating it from known ape species and fueling speculation about its true nature. I believe that there is a small chance that the Orang Pendek may actually exist in some form. My hypothesis is that the Orang Pendek could represent an undiscovered pygmy orangutan species. This is complete speculation, but it is bolstered by the recent discovery of a new orangutan species in Sumatra in 2017, which underscores the region's potential to harbor yet unidentified primates. Also, just for quick reference, this new species is the Tapanuli orangutan. I'll admit that this hypothesis has one major weakness. Orangutans, unlike Orang Pendeks, are not completely bipedal. That said, the Orang Pendek may be quite genetically distant from the orangutan, despite living proximate to it. Another popular theory is that the Orang Pendek represents a local variation of Bigfoot. Now I know what you're saying already. If it's a local version of Bigfoot, why is it so small? Island dwarfism is an evolutionary phenomenon where species evolve into smaller forms on islands. This process occurs due to limited resources, reduced predation threats, and the absence of larger competitors commonly found in mainland ecosystems. Over generations, these environmental pressures favor smaller body sizes, which require fewer resources and are more efficient for survival in restricted habitats. Island dwarfism has been observed in various animals, including elephants, hippos, and even great ape species. There are even examples on Sumatra specifically, where the orang pendek is said to reside. For example, the Sumatran tiger, while still large, is in essence a tiny tiger by a tiger standards, the Sword of Attila the Fun. The Sword of Attila, also known as the Sword of Mars or the Sword of God, is shrouded in myth and legend, playing a significant role in the history and folklore surrounding Attila the Hun. Attila, leader of the Huns from 434 until his death in 453, used the sword as a symbol of divine favor, bolstering his reputation as the Scourge of God. According to Roman historians writing soon after Attila's rampage ended, this sword marked Attila's divine authority over the world. The origins of this revered weapon are wrapped in the mystery of the ages, with different sources offering varied accounts. Historical texts from the 5th century mention the Sword of Attila, though tend to be light on details. Beyond its mention in chronicles, the sword has been immortalized in various forms of art, further embedding its mystique into cultural memory. These representations often depict the sword alongside Attila himself, enhancing its symbolism as a divine instrument of war. The sword's authenticity has been debated over the millennia. Claims of possessing the genuine sword of Attila have emerged from different quarters, yet none have been irrefutably confirmed. The Art History Museum in Vienna houses a weapon thought to be the sword, but conclusive evidence is lacking. Seriously, it seems the Habsburgs, along with the papacy, had a monopoly on every legendary item from the European world. The Sword of Attila intertwines deeply with Hungarian national identity, where it has been celebrated as a historical proof of the link between the Huns and the Magyars. Hungarian tradition, documented as far back as the 13th century, has often linked the legacy of the Huns with Magyar heritage, a connection that is considered dubious by some historians. My view of this sword is that it's entirely mythical, and unlike some of the other legendary weapons discussed in this series, I don't see any basis for reality in this one. Preta, the Hungry Ghost. Preta, commonly known as the Hungry Ghost, is a significant concept in Buddhist mythology, representing beings who are tormented by insatiable hunger and thirst due to their past karmic actions. These beings are said to inhabit waste and deserted places on Earth, varying in their torments based on their previous lives' actions. Some can consume a little food and drink but struggle to find them. Others cannot swallow what they find, while yet others see potential nourishment burst into flames or wither away as they reach for it. Others can eat endlessly but never have their hunger satiated, which made me think of this concept when researching Tarare. The mythology surrounding Preta serves as moral lessons on the consequences of greed, jealousy, and selfishness. Stories from ancient texts illustrate individuals reborn as hungry ghosts as a result of their miserly and unethical behavior in past lives. Anyway, hungry ghosts are perhaps the least threatening ghost-like creatures I've covered on this series. Even traditionally, they pose no apparent threat to humans, aside from the threat of being reborn as one of these creatures, the Yeren. The Yeren, often referred to as China's Bigfoot, is a cryptid believed to inhabit the remote, mountainous regions of China, particularly a remote district in Hubei province. This creature has been a part of Chinese folklore for millennia, with accounts dating back to ancient texts. The earliest representations of the Yeren may have come as early as approximately 340 BC, and it's likely that oral traditions existed prior to this. The Yeren is described as a large, bipedal creature covered in hair, with a physical appearance that combines features of both apes and humans. It is typically portrayed as walking upright and is said to be over 6 feet tall. Reports of hairy, human-like beings date back to ancient China, with notable mentions in works such as the Compendium of Materia Medica by Li Shichen in the 16th century AD. In rural Hubei, there were rumors that Yeren could be descendants of laborers who fled while building the Great Wall of China. Yes, you heard that correctly. The rural folk thought that ape men built the Great Wall of China. Following Mao taking control of China, interest in the Yeren was suppressed. China experienced a fervent crackdown on superstitious and spiritual beliefs, including the narratives surrounding mysterious ape men like the Yeren and Yeti. The government's campaign was rooted in the conviction that such superstitions detracted from productivity. For instance, fears of encountering these creatures could deter farmers from their fields. As a result, spreading these tales could lead to punishment. This environment led to a significant decline in scientific interest in these cryptids during this period. However, some Chinese cryptozoologists bravely continued their investigation into the Yeren, however under the guise of dismissing superstition. For instance, one cryptozoologist would interview people about their Yeren encounters to quote-unquote document and dispel superstition. Obviously, this was simply a cover to keep investigating the creatures, and there was no legitimate effort on the part of these cryptozoologists to suppress the creature. After Mao, people were once again allowed to express a wider range of beliefs without risking, quote, re-education or worse. Following the end of the Mao era, China witnessed a resurgence of interest in the Yeren. This period, often referred to as the Yeren Fever era, saw the diminishing of taboos against superstitions and a newfound openness to Western cryptozoological literature. The late 1970s and 1980s were characterized by numerous expeditions seeking evidence of the Yeren, notably in Hubei province. These ventures, involving a diverse array of participants from military personnel to local villagers, aimed to gather physical proof such as footprints and hair samples. In 1981, the China Wildman Research Society was established and played a pivotal role in efforts to prove its existence, even offering monetary rewards for conclusive evidence of the creature. Scientific opinions on the Yeren varied, with some researchers proposing it as a relict of Gigantopithecus or an undiscovered hominid species. Others extremely controversially suggested it might represent an unevolved form of modern humans. Personally, I find the Yeren so fascinating because it has legitimately been documented for over 2 millennia. That said, I'm still of the opinion that the most likely explanation for the Yeren is the misidentification of local fauna, such as bears, as ape creatures. Make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Also, check out the Patreon and the YouTube membership. Your support allows me to take on more difficult topics that risk demonetization. Remember to hit the playlist to see dozens of hours of Unsolved Mysteries content. Shout out to my patrons Noah Schubert, Kazakh Cutie, Kurt the Squirt, Monoxide Wendigo, and Jeffer Metcalf. Also, big shout out to YouTube members Jordan All and Syntax Nexus. Until next time, stay safe and healthy. Peace out, everyone.